All you want, George, go like this.
Well, if I had some, I'd give it to you.
He saw fear in your eyes, though.
Honking on me. Well, get that over here so I can see it too, because I don't have it. Share.
Sure what?
That thing.
This thing?
Thank you.
I'll give all of this to you.
No, here's the pile.
Yeah.
And Jerry has the pile. She's neat.
Oh, she's taking hers what? Your magazine. George has just been stockpiling his over here. Hoping they recycle that.
Don't start with that. Yawn over there.
Do we need to get you a recliner?
No.
I'll take one.
That didn't make for interesting meetings.
What budget? Get recliners. Oh, is that in the budget?
Say, if we get recliners, then we have to have the clip on to put the iPad on.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, George.
Lazy boys for the
that,
council
he like
members.
recliners back, and I don't have
got a
them
shelf, you could just set it there.
Hey!
What is that phrase?
I used to have one.
Trying to get rid of mine.
A shelf.
Lazy boys for the council
I have one of those.
That's
Yeah.
terrible.
I know, yeah.
So,
That's terrible.
Talking about,
Lazy boys and politicians.
What'd I do?
Nothing. I was actually looking at the good-looking gentleman in front of you.
there's any customer that it works. I mean, that,
give him my number.
He was
I'll talk.
under my control
Where
the
did
other
you
night.
find
A lot
that?
of people.
How about you?
Tam, where did you find that little guy?
I appreciate your impassioned plea at the meeting on Saturday too.
But look at you now.
Pardon?
Do you know?
Yeah, it would be fun to be able to get a continued.
That work?
We'll take
5 years, that's the longest I've ever been able to visit with somebody.
So he went from,
Everybody knows we are live on the recording.
Uh-oh.
Do I need to clarify when I said the
Give them
good?
the ins and
And
outs.
it's a little two-year-old
Oh, I've already talked to you, so
wide.
you bet, yeah. I wondered that. Yeah, we talked 2 days after you met that.
Kylie and
He called me.
good.
Cody's the little one.
Is he saying the invocation?
Is he gonna say the prayer George wants to know? Probably.
Now I lay me down to sleep.
Come, Lord Jesus, be our guest. Yeah,
There you go.
that'd work.
Let this business be blessed.
There you go. Why don't you do that anyway? You're like in the spirit.
Is that a conflict of interest?
Oh, heavens. Look what happened last week. Our video came up right after and he was saying it, so.
I forgot to ask, and I will continue to try to make sure to ask.
Told you, you're in the spirit.
Yeah. And a long driveway.
Avery, get the credit
I
card.
keep forgetting to burn that. That thing, it usually just sits here on.
I figure if I've got.
What the citizens realize I'm using it.
Oh, right.
It's holding my paperwork down.
Oh, Eric, I just thought of something. I don't have a copy of the comprehensive plan.
You have it in the computer, you do.
It's in,
Well,
it's on your,
unfortunately.
it's in your
It's
agenda.
in there too, if you got a copy or it's in your packet
On the computer.
on the computer.
Okay. I thought you had some paper copies at one point.
Did we give you one at the planning meeting?
Actually, I can provide.
No,
you
I didn't get
with
one at
I
the
think
planning.
have.
I honestly, I
think
don't recall. I think I
I was
apologize, I
at
think.
a meeting where I was a guest, and I know
I
you
have one
had
right
them
here.
that.
I've got one.
I can, but eventually I'd like one. Oh, right away I get one? Oh my goodness, thank you so much.
Pass it down this way.
Okay.
Little homework. Oh my God.
I thought it was kind of interesting how much was.
If you haven't read it yet, you're not
I've-
gonna read it by the
I've
time
got-
it's on our agenda.
I got through
A
it.
lot of it, like
The
repeats.
part that I don't remember will be the part I gotta reread.
Yes.
There's been
It's
some-
it's repetitive.
Starting page 2.
Yes.
Okay, y'all ready?
Interested in the bus stop.
Okay, we'll call to order the regular city council meeting for Monday, January 23rd. Start with the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance. Any corrections or anything to the agenda?
Mayor, the only thing we have is we have something to add to the consent calendar, and it's on your agenda as you see in front of you. It's just a quick amendment to the fee schedule, and we had one small item that accidentally had the wrong number in it, and related to the Tier 3 water rates, and so this just basically amends the fee schedule to correct it.
Okay,
Motion to approve is amended.
Second,
first and second, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Anybody from the public that would like to talk about something that is not on the agenda? Janine? Well, I should say
This,
It'll pick up even where it's at, even with a short person.
Okay,
Yeah, it will.
okay. I just wanted to read what I had talked to you about at our meeting on Saturday with the public, so that it can be added to the minutes. And that is, our workforce group would like to have our city council to set a goal of helping raise all the funds for the Tracy Area Community Center by June 1st, 2023. This could be done by allotting the $200,000 COVID payment from Lyon County and also money left over from O'Brien Court sale. We will continue our fundraising, working at obtaining grants and hosting fundraising events. Grants have deadlines, and that's kind of why we want to get this going. And we feel we will have the money raised by June 1st, and with the $200,000 or even the money left over from the O'Brien Court sale, we'll be good to go. So I think that's pretty exciting.
Very exciting.
So, we want to thank all the citizens of Tracy and our businesses, and thank you. You know, I think it just shows, you know, we always talk about Tracy and all the problems we have, but look at, this is a very positive thing. And look at all the support we've been given, and I think that's just great. I mean, that's everybody. That's not just us doing the work. That's everybody helping us out, the city of Tracy. So, thank you.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you guys for all the work that you're doing with this also, and for the city of Tracy.
We're going to check if there was any questions.
Oh, are there any questions? Are there any questions? Because we're here tonight, so we can help answer those if you have any. Hopefully, we can answer them.
The only thing I had, I didn't know if the thermometer had been updated yet.
No, it has not.
It will be tomorrow.
Okay, because it's going to get colder, so you want to raise the heat.
Temperature?
All right, thank you.
Janine, did you have any updated fundraising totals to share with us?
Not at this point. We have 450,000 total, and yes, we will be getting more in. We know of that. We know we have that coming, but right at this moment, I'm not going to share those. Okay.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the public who would like to talk about something that is not on the agenda?
Well, Mayor, I did have a question, not to her, but to us. What point does the city council think they can start going to bid to get this moving along? I mean, how high does it obviously, hopefully we don't have to go to the full 850, because first of all, we don't know it's going to cost that much. That's just an estimate. So do we have a trigger point, say at 600, 625, 550, that we could say, all right, let's go to bid, see where we're at, to know how much more we got to finish with? Does anybody have any, and I don't know if this is a place to bring that up or not.
I would be curious to see where we are when we reach that June deadline, and then at that point in time be able to say, okay.
Talk about it?
Yeah. I mean, I would be open to, if it's not at the full 850, at least discussing, okay, what's our, and I think that's what we'll have to do, is discuss what our next step is at that point, because, fundraising would continue, but underneath, what is that goal? What's our next step? Hopefully by then we may have a grant that would cover the...
If you're looking at me to answer that question, because you just looked at me.
I didn't look at you, but you leaned forward and got right in my way.
I think what you're saying makes sense. I mean, we had kind of been preparing for the idea that we would, kind of take with the number that we had and then have a discussion about, projects and things like that, about that time frame. So you can decide, okay, is this close enough? Do we want to do more? There's a couple of grants we are, applying for. One of them is and actually, you know what? You're here, Val. Why don't you just talk about that? I think it'd be appropriate for Val to talk about it. There's a couple. One of them we're targeting for design, and then there's a few other ones as well. And I think it would be worth it for Val to talk about that real quick since she's here.
Currently, we're looking at an Age-Friendly Minnesota grant that just came out. There was a webinar on Thursday of last week. I think Janine and Karen were both in on that. And Janine and I kind of chatted about it afterward. We both kind of had the same impression that this would be most feasible to use for the design process of it. And we can get up to $99,000 for that. Whether we'll get, as the full amount that we ask for or not. They could give us 50, they could give us 25. We don't know for sure, but I think that's a good option for the design process. And then we're looking at a T-Mobile grant, and that one's up to $50,000, I believe. And that one will be getting submitted at the end of March. And both of those have pretty quick turnaround times where they let you know pretty quickly whether you get it or not. It's not one of those federal ones where you wait for 6 months and forget that you even submitted the grant. And oh yeah, the Carlin Verna Schmidt Foundation is another one that we could get as much as $50,000 for.
So I noticed that Boxcar Wind gave us. Have we approached the other couple? I don't know, like 2 or 3 or 4 companies that are like in this area.
Those aren't really. That isn't. Well, we did send in an application for that. All these companies specifically have places to make those kinds of requests. Apex Boxcar Wind did in this particular case. I think that the fundraising group has approached a number of and has gotten some corporate donations already, and so I think you may have even approached some of those other wind companies as well.
Well, the Next Era Wind and utility company whose office is in Marshall.
Yep.
We did. That was a pretty small one, though.
Yeah, that was my memory as well. I think this is the big one, and they had a place on their website with an application that we sent in.
Yeah, there was a formal application.
That was a little bit different. One of the challenges for some of these things is there's like a couple different kinds of ways to do this. Some of them are just straight donations, from a corporate account or something like that. But some of these companies have foundations, or they choose community, things to give to, and they have a formal process. Some of them don't have a formal process. Some of them ask you to apply, so they're all a little bit different. In the case of Boxcar, we specifically applied for that.
Thank you for doing that.
So just from a process standpoint, our thought is that we continue to collect and see how much money we have, and like, Tom said, in June, to specifically answer your question, if we were to get this for design, that would be 100% grants, so we wouldn't have to put anything into it. We probably could start to release an RFP for somebody to do design if we got that grant even before the June, because there's no skin off our back at that point, right? Because we're not spending any city money on it to get an actual design. But we wouldn't be able to really do a construction bid until we had full design, because they need to have those documents in order to bid on them. So we do that first, then we go back and do the construction. So we'll just have to see, when all that happens is the short answer. But we'll get there.
Sounds good.
I have a question regarding the design. So would we proceed with asking for a design without knowing if we would do the building attached to this building?
So here's what I would suggest that we do with that, since we don't know the answer to that question. But what I've already talked to the group about is that we do a design with options. So it includes a design for attaching it and not attaching it. And that gives us the flexibility to decide what direction to go, and then also helps us, because one of the things that, the concern that was actually raised by the city council a little bit ago, or a couple months ago, is, well, how does the State Historic Preservation Office feel about attaching a building to this building? And could it possibly endanger any potential application for historic status for this building, which if we didn't get, we would not be able to access a lot of money from the State Historic Preservation Office to do work on this building. And the short answer is that we don't know yet. And we probably wouldn't be able to know unless we actually had a visual to show them as to whether they thought that was okay or not okay. And that would be one of the good reasons to do the design in the first place, because you could show that as an option and then give it to them and say, hey, how do you feel about this? Is this something you could support, kind of thing? And so I think what you would do is you would release an RFP design that had that as an option in it for people to review.
That reassures me a little bit that we would not exclude that idea.
No, I don't think we were excluding anything at this point.
I didn't say that, but I'm just glad that we wouldn't exclude it in the design.
Certainly wouldn't.
Thank you.
I had one other question then, so at what point in time do we visit the request that they've made for the COVID funds and for the O'Brien Court?
I think we'd have to say that, I'll talk about each one of those separately. That's a request from the county. I think we would do that at the same time, in June, that we have that discussion as to whether or not that's something we want to spend that money on, that or something else. And the county would have to approve that. So that's not money we just ask for and they give to us. That makes sense. We're not necessarily entitled to it. We have to make application to them for it. The O'Brien Court money has already been appropriated in your 2023 budget.
That's what I thought.
So that money is not available. Because back in August, when the city council met and prioritized capital projects, the remaining $168,000 of that was allocated to the 2023 capital program.
So do we know the limitations of that 200,000?
We haven't had any specific conversations with the commissioners about this particular project, no.
Would it be a good idea or not a bad idea? Few of us know the county commissioners. Should we visit with them a little bit or just stay out?
Well, you may remember that Jeff and I had already had some conversation with the county commissioners about potentially making application to a business park application. And honestly, the city council hasn't discussed it, and I think that it might be premature for anybody to talk about it until we decide what we're going to do, and I certainly won't make any inquiries either for the same reason, because if most of the council members, majority of council members want to make application for something else than other than an industrial park, which we would have brought to you eventually anyway, but we weren't ready for that either because the money doesn't need to be spent until 2024, so we weren't planning on discussing it until we discussed the 2024 budget. So I would suggest that we sit tight until we have all the information, and then you will ultimately decide as council how you want to proceed.
Very good.
So I had one question. If we wait until June, is it like on a first come, first served basis?
I'll verify that with the county that's the case, but that money doesn't have to be spent until 2024. But I'll make sure that it doesn't go away ahead of time so that there's not a deadline.
Well,
I'll ask that question.
While you're asking, I would specifically like to know what constraints there are. Does it have to be does it have to be for something that will, in the end, actually generate a tax base, or it can be something that the city spends on itself, that kind of thing? I would like just to know that, and rather than wait until June, I think even if we
I can
don't
get the
apply
information.
until June, it'd be nice to know the information.
I can get the information. I'll work on that.
It would be, let's see how to get this one right so it makes sense. It would be a big benefit for the city since we lost the community center a few years back because of COVID.
Yeah,
That we would use that money for the new community center.
Yeah.
So to me, I don't know how they could say no, but it's easier to say no than yes, I guess.
And then I'm just going to reiterate what I said at our planning meeting on Saturday. And my concern is if we wait until June to even talk about this, that we're losing time because we're going to have to put together a proposal for the county. And then by the time you have your plans and approvals and whatever, we'd probably burn most of 2023.
I think that the commissioners are going to want to know that a project is going to happen before they give money, because the money has to be spent in 2024, by 2024. And so what I would suggest is that you can't have that discussion about whether you're going to use this $200,000 until for sure the council says, yes, we're going to go with this project and it's going to be constructed in 2024. Because I promise you the commissioners wouldn't give us money for something that we can't get done.
When you say 2024, is it January 1st of 2024 or December 31st of 2024?
Yeah.
I should know the specific answer to that question. It's not January 1st. The only question that I have in my mind is it the fiscal year of 2024, the federal fiscal year, or is it the calendar year? That's a piece of information you request me to get on Saturday, and I haven't looked it up yet.
When is the federal fiscal year?
It's October.
$200,000 would go a long way to saying, yeah, we are going to do it.
Yeah.
That would,
to me,
600 and
I understand the
we're at
chicken and
8.
egg question in the sense of urgency. I mean, our plan has, and the way that is set now in the approved capital improvement plan in your budget documents is if the money is raised for this project for the community center construction in 2024. That's how it is laid out currently in the capital improvement plan. So this has always been, we're right on target based on what the feeling was on this.
So you're going like this. Does that mean we can't push it up a little bit?
I would never say can't to anything until I knew for sure exactly what it was. I think it would be difficult because we have to go through design first before we start to bid the construction, and that would take a while. And right now we don't have any money appropriated for any of it, so that would have to change. And then we'd have to go out and find the actual cash to do it. So there's a lot of hoops to go through before you're ready to do the construction.
I think the main thing is we just have to keep track of the multiple balls that we're keeping up in the air. Mm-hmm. We said June 1st to try to get the donation so that when you guys are going out and people are considering if they're going to donate to this, if businesses are and everything, that they have that June 1st deadline. We've got this grant out there now that we're going to apply for that might help pay or would pay for the design and everything. Well, that ball, we can take that ball if we get it and move forward with this ball while this one's still over here till June 1st.
That's correct.
So I think it's really hard to say this day is when we can start going to the county, when we can move forward. There's just too many balls, but we just have to make sure when one ball's ready to act, we act on it. We don't wait for the design thing if we have the grant until June 1st. We move forward with this because it's not going to cost the taxpayers, the city, any money if we get that grant. So I think it's really hard to nail down a specific date when we can go to the county. I do think we need the specifics so we know, is this even going to qualify for it? If we find out it's not going to qualify for the COVID grant, then we know not to, or the COVID money, then we know not to even waste time trying to figure out how we're going to write that. Because you can still be doing a lot of thinking. I'm sure Val has thought about it. I'm sure Eric and Jeff have, because you talked to them about a different project. So you have an idea of what you would need to write. So it's not like it would take 4 months to write to the county, but I think we just need those facts so it's easier to pull a trigger.
That's well put, I agree.
That brings me to a question then. If the COVID money doesn't qualify for this project, can we put the COVID money into the project where the O'Brien Court money is, take that money and put it into this project? I realize you got it in the budget, whatever, but can we do some trading?
I think it's dependent on the same answer, which is, how do the commissioners feel about the project and projects as well as the qualification of the funds. I mean, certainly money could be fungible that way, potentially, yes. That's a possibility for sure.
But then you have to remember what that 168 or 69,000, whatever, was appropriated for.
Well, I think
is now going to not be done because we already appropriated that.
Well, that's not true.
One of the things was the hangars, which might not happen until 2024 anyway. I think was one of the amounts, wasn't it?
There's
our portion.
The city council approved a capital improvement plan that has a number of projects on it. One of them is hangars, yes. The other one is the pool liner, and those are the two big ones. And then there's a bunch of smaller projects on there too, on top of that. But those are the two big ones that would be affected by that if you pulled that money out and put it on something else. But the city council's, in my mind, until there's a vote to change that, that's written in whatever that resolution is written in.
I thought the pool liner money come from the balance money of some bond.
Yeah. There's multiple sources of funds, and so you've got projects. You've got to fill your capital plan this year. You've got multiple sources of funds. Some of that is the bond money. Some of that is O'Brien Court. Some of that is some other money. So there's multiple sources going into the capital budget, and then multiple projects that are being spent in that capital budget.
Good question.
Okay.
All right, anybody else from the audience that wants to talk about something that is not on the agenda?
I'd just like to say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
You too, Tim.
Okay, Dave. Do you want to?
Sure. I'll make a motion to approve the January 9th council minutes, approve municipal accounts payable and payroll without breakthrough beverage, approve municipal accounts receivable, approve the December 5th planning commission minutes, approve the November 30th park minutes, approve resolution 2023-8, approve the gambling permit for the ROYO, assuming the fees are paid if there are any. And then approve resolution 2023-12 to amend the fee schedule.
What was that on again, the fee schedule?
It's on that sheet of paper you have.
Surcharge.
It is the surcharge. I typed in 16 instead of 19. That's what it should have been, is 19. 16 is what it's just on a 10 key, they're right next to each other. It's my fault.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion?
I have a question, Mayor, about the Planning Commission minutes. At the bottom of the minutes, it says, pursuing the railroad for financial contributions was suggested, and then it lists the Planning Commission member who's supposed to investigate who to talk to. What are we talking about seeking contributions for the railroad? Is it improving the crossings, or what is that?
The discussion at that moment, I think it had to do with the crossings. Yeah, I mean, I think there were some concerns about, particularly Center Street has been, something that people have complained about. But it was more general than that. Like, hey, the railroad has money to give. Should we, ask them to give money to help the community, kind of thing. as a potential donation. I think that was a lot of it.
Okay.
It was a big, wide-ranging discussion.
Yeah, okay.
It's just the crossings, have been pretty bad, and
That
I
one's
know the
bad.
guys tried to do some with that one down there on Center Street here this summer or whatever, but that really the railroad needs to hopefully step up and,
Yeah, there are some problem areas there.
yeah.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Roll call, please.
Dobson,
Yes.
Arvisa,
Yes.
Tiggs,
Aye.
Shones,
Aye.
Landite,
Aye.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Mayor Corbin.
Aye.
I'll make a motion to approve accounts payable with break. Four.
Sorry?
First and second, any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Dobson,
Yes.
Landite,
Aye.
Shones,
Aye.
Arvisa,
Yes.
Mayor Corbin.
Aye. Do we have anything else for Mayor Community Council? That was Mayor, yeah, Council Communication? Or did we do it already? Anybody else have anything for that? Okay. Staff reports? Who would like to go first?
Raise your hand.
To go
And everybody jump at once.
All right, Tamara.
You'll just let her go first.
So, actually, I don't really have a whole lot to talk about. I believe in November, the end of November, we were about 3,000 above cash flow budget. So I'm hoping, assuming, and that we're ahead of the game. And
I desperately wanted to have a final P&L for you today, trust me. Tyler and I were talking about it. We were having issues with calculating the sales tax remitted. I don't know if we were talking about it at 4:30 this afternoon, so I apologize. I think we probably did meet our goal for the year, but yes, I'll take the blame for that one.
so we're hoping and assuming that we did good. We definitely had like low inventory and that kind of thing in December, like we needed to and we're supposed to. So hoping that came out well. Our sign that we've been desperately waiting for to put on like our pole for like advertising. I talked to Jamie today and now got pushed back to February, but he promised me that it's hopefully supposed to be done in February. And we are having a meeting for Burgers, Bands, and Brews coming up this week, so think warm.
Nice, yeah.
For it'll be like the first weekend, the first Saturday in June. So otherwise, not really much after other than that. Just kind of January is kind of a slow-ish kind of month. But anybody have any questions or anything?
Well, I do have one question, and I don't remember the dates, but I got called from several citizens when the weather was poor that you were closed and they were forced to go out of town to get their spirits. So I wondered, what policy do we have, or can we have it so if the grocery store is open, that can be open? I mean, if you get workers there, if you can't get workers there, I understand. But if you can get workers there, can we be open?
I'm gonna
Solve
take
that?
this one from you, Tam, to save you.
I'll give you a different answer.
No, we don't have a policy. The first 2 years that I was here, we didn't close anything because we didn't have any bad weather. And then we started having this bad weather, and so we made some decisions on the fly as to what we were going to do when we were going to do it. Some people agree with those decisions. Some people didn't agree with those decisions. Ultimately, we don't have a policy. I believe we should have a policy with regard to when we close things, when we don't, under what conditions, how do you make that decision, things like that. Kind of like what we have the snow plowing policy, when do we plow and how much do we plow and things like that. So I do intend to bring that to you, relatively soon because it's still winter. But the short answer is we don't. And so we made the best decisions we could at the moment. given what we knew about the weather, trying to keep people safe and all of those kinds of things. But it would be great if we had a policy so that we had some direction about where we're going to go.
Well, I don't know if that's a good policy or not. The grocery store's open, they can be open.
That's my idea.
I think that there's a lot of things that go into this, and I think it's a great discussion to have at a future city council meeting when we kind of throw something out there to see what you think about it.
The only suggestion I have to start with, don't make it all or none. Because the different businesses, the library is different than a retail place.
Yeah, I think that's worth debating. I'm not sure that I share your opinion, but I serve at the pleasure of the city council. We'll see, how people feel about it, and we'll implement whatever policy you wish.
It's just a policy, and then, with a policy, I mean, there's still gray areas where you have to kind of make judgments.
Oh, that's what I don't like. Because if there's gray areas, then I make a decision. Someone criticizes me for it. I mean, that's why.
Some things is hard to have
Let's
black
just say,
and white.
You serve at the pleasure, and you get a lot of
Oh boy.
Let's just say the weather is never black and white.
Yes.
Oh, well, I wish it were. I wish the weather forecasts were black and white too.
That
That's
being
the
said,
problem with the weather, is
that
the
being said,
forecast.
I guess I sit on another board, and they have committees. You have the grounds committee, you have the building committee, you have the retail committee,
Right.
whatever. So let's step up, us council people, and volunteer for one of them. So it's not on his, he does what we want, so it's not up to him.
I'm going to be candid with you. Yes, it's up to you in terms of the policy. I agree with you on that. I'm going to be candid with you. This board isn't really set up to be a board of committees. It's a governing board. You set policies and direction, and ultimately you're tasking the staff, through me and department heads to do things. And so your experience on maybe some of those grain elevators and something like that where you have less staff, I mean, it's a little bit different kind of governance structure than what we
30
have.
people isn't less staff.
It's a different structure than the way the charter envisions how this governing board works.
That way, when we make the policy, then he has to follow.
That's
They
right.
all have to.
Absolutely, and I will follow whatever policy you set. That I promise you.
But we do have organizations that do what you're talking about and do function as committees with underneath the auspices of this. I mean,
There
so it's
used
not
to be
unusual.
there used to be a liquor store committee, wasn't there? Yep, one time.
Yes.
There's an
That was
advisory committee on the
mostly-
building. Yeah.
Yeah, that
Oh.
was mostly for the
Just the building.
building.
Just don't.
I think that's an important thing to add.
Okay, I have
Did,
one thing to add to that. And Shane, I don't want you to take this the wrong way because you did a great job widening the streets and everything. But the liquor store is like the number one place where we make money in Tracy, and people complain all the time about the parking lot. So can they just like swoop through there every now and then?
We do, but the state also.
I was gonna say, the state is the one that like
Yeah.
did that, and people, oh yeah,
Can you talk to them?
yeah. You might have to make one swoop after the state.
Well, state makes multiple swoops, that's the issue.
But it does seem like that area just,
It's
I mean,
bad.
that's just set up for the wind to come through there and deposit it right in front of the door. I know I've grabbed the shovel a couple times just to, it's gotta be a constant process to try to, and then people are tramping on it and driving on it, but it's.
By the way, you
Yeah.
guys have done a great job.
You do.
Yeah, the streets look awesome.
Yep, you've done your crew, not just you. Your crew has done a
Yeah,
great
you're
job.
pretty doing a good job. How are we doing with Boxcar Brew? Do we have a huge amount of inventory?
You know what, I just looked
Work through it?
yesterday and we have like 111 4-packs and 234 6-packs left or whatever, but we, yeah, it's dwindling. So
Does it have a shelf life? I mean, I don't know.
I was told a year, I believe. Is that what they said, Eric? Do you remember?
Yeah, I mean it's pasteurized, so it lasts a lot longer.
Okay.
So yeah, it's not something that has a short shelf life.
But I looked and we're still selling 1 to 2 a day, kind of, I mean, just ballparking it, but
Do you have any of that that's warm?
Why, what?
Is it all cold or is there some that's warm?
Some warm and some cold.
They should use that for the chamber banquet, put for the centerpieces.
Sure, why not?
I mean,
It's a good idea.
take some flowers or something on it, so then it's like in everybody's.
They will disappear.
That would be all right.
If they disappear,
The chamber can
Yes.
buy him at a price and give him away his door
Would
prize.
be, we need to reduce that inventory for sure.
So,
I
Cam,
mean,
even though you don't have the bottom line for the year, you're feeling good about the 2022?
Yes, I think so. Don't you think?
I think so.
Yeah, I think so.
I think we'll be all right.
You know, inventory wise, like reducing inventory toward the December and that kind of thing, we did big time, so I'm hoping the bottom line, and we had a really, I mean, we had a good Christmas Eve, we had a good, despite the weather, and we had a good New Year's, so we had a good December. So,
If I could just, if I could just make one comment about the closing the liquor store in bad weather. Most of the time, unless it's horrendous, and then the grocery store would close. What my fear was, when we close our liquor store, we're going to have people that are willing to try and attempt to make it to Marshall.
or
they
Walnut.
did that to
They
both.
did
Or
that.
Walnut.
That's
A
the
lot.
calls I got.
They went both ways a lot.
Yeah, they're not gonna go home.
Right, and so, especially for the people that live within our city, you know, that wanted to try and pick something up, and it was closed, so then they venture out. And in my personal opinion, that then puts them more at jeopardy than if we would have left it open.
I think that's something to consider when they're putting it together.
I was out in the state of Washington at the time, and I don't know how many calls I fielded
Really?
from people that were less than fun to talk to.
You should have given my cell phone number. I was in Washington State too.
Like,
Why didn't we hook up, by the way, in Washington State when we were there?
but anyway, it followed me out there, the news.
Yeah. Okay, well, we will make that policy. When you have that ready. All right, anybody else for Tam?
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, helper.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Should have a badge for them or something.
Val, do you want to go?
As you can see, we have a lot going on as usual, especially with our winter reading program going on until the end of March. Just wanted to highlight a program that we have coming up. We're doing a Medicare 101 class on February 7th from 1:30 to 3:30, and that will be done through the senior linkage line. They'll be coming and they'll have packets of information and everything for people, so you don't want to miss that. And then community education, art classes are ongoing this winter too, and registration for those is through Community Ed. We had a really good turnout for our first class last week, even though the road conditions weren't too great, but we still had 8 people there for the charcoal drawing class, so it was really fun.
That Medicare class?
Yeah.
Is that a date that they set, or is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we looked at it, we looked at a couple of different dates, but they typically want to do them during the day, for our
Well, I
retired
guess
people.
Timing-wise, probably more timely would be someplace in late summer, early fall.
Ah,
would be
okay.
The open enrollment period.
Sure.
Because that's when everybody's starting to ask the questions, so something that's close to that same
Sure.
date might be better attended maybe at home. And when the snowbirds are here.
So you don't have a date for that yet?
Yeah, we do, February 7th.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
It's not for my information, it's for others.
Yeah, you're not over.
And they do have some other classes too, so we'll see how this one goes. And hopefully we can get some other things like that coming. I've also been in contact with someone who does some financial planning classes. So it'd be things like wills and estates and stuff like that, which would be nice to have also. So. Any
Thank you.
Great job.
Thanks for all the grants and stuff that you're
Yes, thank
pounding
you for
through
all
for
that
us.
work.
You're
Appreciate
very
it.
welcome.
Fantastic.
Jason, you want to go?
I would love to. I'll entertain any questions you have on the numbers I gave you. I believe I have the 2022 squad repair situation figured out. I'm not quite sure when they'll have the parts on hand to do it, but I have it lined up so that once it goes to the installer, that there's a body shop like right down the street from there that the insurance company's working with. So it'll make one trip up, get all the police equipment taken off the front, get fixed, go right back to the installer, and then back to us. So it'll just make things simpler for us, so we don't have to make a couple trips to the cities. We tried to bid it locally, and they weren't interested in removing the police equipment off of it, so it would have, then we would have had to done double trips to the cities to have it done. So I've also been asked to talk about snow procedures tonight for when Shane declares a snow emergency, and so once Shane calls me or notifies my department that there's a snow emergency in effect, then we put it out on our Facebook page. We try to do a Nixle, which is broadcast to whoever subscribes to the Nixle, and then we also try to put it out on if the radio stations are doing public service announcements, we'll try to get their cooperation to do that. So then once that's in effect, we try to do the Nixle at least once, if not twice. So Shane knows by noon that they're going to be going curb to curb at 2 o'clock. We'll try to put one out in the afternoon and one in the evening between 7 and 9 o'clock per se. And then everything that, if the snow emergency is in effect, then everything that's plowed around gets a citation.
So if it sits there multiple days, they just get one citation?
No, if there's a snow emergency and they get cited, and then they have another snow emergency, say a day or 2 days later, like we have here lately, and they get plowed again, they'll get a second citation for that. And if that doesn't get moved and cleaned up within a short period of time before the next snow emergency, we'll tow it.
Okay, that was my question.
Yeah.
Is at what point in time do we just get it out of there?
So it's
They
like
would have
2 warnings
two-
or 2 citations and then a toll.
Yeah.
What is the citation for first offense?
Dollar-wise?
Yeah.
$75 on the fee schedule.
What's the second one?
Same.
Oh. Should we bump that up? I don't know, I'm just asking.
It should be enough to get
I was
people's
just gonna say,
attention.
I don't know if it's.
Now, you said that if they don't move it and clear, is that a part of the citation, that they clear the snow from what is around it, or do we wind up taking that on? You know, the pile of snow that goes all the way around it, they just shovel it out enough to get the car out and they leave everything else sitting there. Is that still their responsibility?
If it's a hazard, yes.
Okay,
If the city's out doing cleanup and it's just part of their cleanup,
I would assume that's what it mostly is.
You know,
That's what I've seen.
if it's out of the way and it gets cleaned up, it gets cleaned up.
Sure, okay.
So, you agree with that,
People really,
for the most part? Yeah.
people really can't use, I didn't know, for the second day anyway, or third day, I wouldn't think, because once you get, just know when it snows in Minnesota, you need to get it off the street.
Well, I don't know if we're unusual, but I know that there are many communities that don't allow any street parking from a point in time in late fall until a point in time in early spring. I mean, it just,
And we were that way.
Yeah.
It was from November 1st to April 1st. There was no parking on the street, period.
And we don't do that, we don't enforce
don't.
that, or we don't do that?
No, the council changed that.
Okay.
Jason, was that for overnight or was it day and night? That we didn't allow any parking in
That
this?
was overnight, yep.
Yeah, so
It was from
more than
11 a.m. to
When
6.
you guys would be out plowing?
Yeah, it was 11 p.m. to 6 a.m.
Thank you.
Yep.
is there enough of this happening that should be considered again, or is it kind of, is it,
You know, it kind of goes by the snow emergency, I think.
I mean, what's it been like this
I think so far for the whole season of the snow events we've had, we've maybe issued 14 or 15 citations.
Okay.
So like 3 to 5 a snow event.
Now, if this happens to be are there certain routes where we have lower tolerance to, at what point in time we plow? I mean, like
Oh yeah,
hospital routes or...
you always have the people that don't ever shovel and just pay the $75 every time they get plowed around.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So,
Really?
Thank you for your support.
yeah. So,
That go in the city coffer or the police fund?
no, it goes in the general, I'm sure.
The city and the police fund are the same thing.
Oh,
Wow.
People are
That's expensive parking, eh?
It's expensive parking.
Pay somebody to.
Well, I know there's some areas where there's just no off-street parking available if there's multiple housing or something of that sort where there's just not enough sufficient parking. So I kind of understand, but yeah,
so don't shut off, please.
we think.
But I think we're really pretty fortunate with the amount of off-street parking we have compared to the Twin Cities.
Oh,
and the
yeah.
number of cars that they have up there, so
Yeah,
I think we've got it pretty good.
and 75 isn't too bad compared to what that's
Oh,
in the
my.
cities. Get it out of impound.
Okay.
Anybody else have anything for Jason? Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Shane, do you have a meeting tonight?
Not that I know.
No,
I
that
didn't
he's
know
the only
when
one.
you're-
He's in one right now,
The
Mayor.
fire department is the first, right? The first meeting we have on the first of the month?
We're second and third Mondays.
You
Okay.
gotta be unrestricted on the fourth one.
Yeah.
Next.
Tyler, I know that you don't have anything, but do you want to step up there and just, is everything going okay?
Yeah, talk to us.
Share a little bit. So, been learning a lot about the software, a lot to take in there. All the accounts payable, accounts receivable, general ledger, been getting a lot of training there. I have a whole nother week of training coming up in early February, and starting to feel a lot more comfortable there. And I was really thankful to Diane for getting all the W-2s ready. She did a great job on that. In the office, just today, I found out that Stacy, our newer employee, she got approval to do driver's license. So that is extremely exciting.
Nice.
We've been pretty overwhelmed in there. Krista's felt very overwhelmed, and Diane as well, when Krista's not there and has to come down and help with driver's licenses. So very good news. It'll take a while for her to get up to speed, but hopefully.
Is that why the two different times on the website for license and, okay.
Yep.
That makes sense.
So starting January 30th, we're going to be getting back to our hours from 8 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. But we're still going to be on a limited schedule for driver's licenses because Stacy still needs to learn how. She can't do it by herself yet. But I'm hoping that this month of February, she'll be able to learn enough that by March we'll be back to normal, open completely, normal hours.
That'll be nice.
Yep.
Okay.
And congratulations are in order right here.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. He's been great. Any questions? All right.
No, thanks
Glad
for
to
joining
have
us
you.
tonight.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very much.
All right, Shane, last but not least.
Always the last picked on the playground.
Why would it change?
Right. I don't know if you want to talk about snow first or. We have been widening streets, I guess as quick as we can. We've had a few breakdowns. We're trying to scrape too at the same time. I know I had a few unhappy people today for the slush and stuff we pushed off the road, but we're limited on where we can go with it. But I guess all I can say is just try to scoop it out before it gets too cold. It's not going to move very well. They're working through that, hoping to see asphalt everywhere again in the very near future. Some roads are pretty much bare now, but there's a few that still need some work. But taking it off in layers, so working on that. I did kind of put a total in for the cemetery burials, and then code enforcement. I got a summary for weed notices and property maintenance code violations for 2022. I guess weed notices, most of those are tax forfeited properties that we end up mowing every year. Some new, some went away, but there's about 3 that were homeowners and that we ended up mowing and billing them out. I'm simply to say the remainder of them either mowed on their own or they were tax forfeited. So as far as property maintenance code violations, we had about 6 that are completed, that are off that list for last year. Hope to see that number up a little higher, but it's kind of been the average the last 3 years looking back.
How many people did we have to take to court?
We're kind of changing our process there. We haven't taken any to court for the last couple of years, but 3 years, I think it's before COVID, since we had one in court.
In the past, it's been a criminal violation, and you know what happens, and I think Jason would attest to this, is that you go and they get a little fine and it gets dismissed, and the fine becomes less than the actual work. The biggest problem, so in conversations with Matt Gross, doing some kind of civil procedure probably makes some sense, or abatement. And abatement is easy for things like junk in their yard. You just go in and clean it up, or mowing a lawn or something. You just go mow the lawn. But if the remedy is you need to shingle your roof, I mean, that's a real hard thing to kind of go in and just shingle somebody's roof and bill them for it. There's some logistical issues to how we do these things. Our tools are pretty limited, but one of the questions that I have for City Council that I haven't asked yet, but I would like to ask at some point in the future, is how aggressive do you want to be with these kinds of things? Because we can be more aggressive, but it takes more money when you're talking about legal procedures. And I think that's, kind of understanding where we're at right now is important, but we can do more and be more aggressive. It's going to take more money and more manpower on some of this stuff, and just how aggressive do you want to be is, I think, the question. I'm not asking for an answer right now, but I think it's worth a good discussion on City Council about that.
Well, we had 2 that we did resolutions on, one up in Broad Acres and what the other one was. How did we wind up? I mean, is there a clock on those 2?
I'm not going to push them too hard right now because it's about 6 foot of snow in both of them. So
do we get any response out of them?
Not yet. Still needs to get reviewed by the attorney. So I'm gonna kind of wait till next month and push that on.
Okay.
So
those would be kind of good test cases for us.
Yeah. I mean, that's a different process. It's hazardous building law, where the rest are just property maintenance. So hazardous building is kind of a life safety thing, where property maintenance is more an aesthetics thing. So that's kind of 2 different animals there. One's state statute, one's city code. So
These tax forfeited properties you're talking about, so nobody's not paying the taxes or anything?
yeah, they're owned by the state, but they're managed by the county.
Would it, this is off the wall here, but would it make sense for some of those properties, if we want new homes in this town, to just give them the property? They got to do the clearing and they can build a new house on that property so that we can get the tax out of the new home. It has to have it just sit there and keep crumbling down.
I think we have to pay the county off to get the lot.
We own a number of lots already. We don't have people banging down our doors to buy lots. So,
well, that's why I say if we just give them to
I know, but I think
yes, we
that
do.
is-
We do have lots listed, yes, specifically. And the Broad Acres lots, about a year ago, I asked Jeff to list them, and he did. And it took 9 months for one to sell, and the other one is still for sale. And so, yes, we do. I think this is a broader discussion about housing that we probably need to continue to have in terms of how we handle these kinds of things. You know, do you tear buildings down? Do you try to buy them? You know, what do you do with empty lots then if you have them, and how do you sell them? Should we be combining them? You know, some things like that. I think there aren't simple answers to any of these questions. It's a hard, difficult thing to do.
Did Jeff have a copy of all those? That'd be through EDA, I think.
I had a conversation with Jeff about tax forfeited properties a couple days ago. And what actually Shane was part of that conversation too. And what Jeff said was that he didn't feel like that it was really easy to get the information out of the county to even have them tell you how many there are, you know, in your community and what stage they're at and things like that. So I asked him, I said, okay, I said, because I know the EDA board was asking the same question a couple of weeks ago, and I said, you know, let's try to get a better number on that. Let's find out how many we actually have, where they are, what condition they're in, and some things like that, so that we can try to address it. His feeling was that it was difficult to find, but I asked him to see what he could do. So that's a piece of information we're working on collecting for the EDA board, and when we have it, we'll share it with the rest of council too.
And usually a lot of tax forfeited properties, after it goes through whatever process has to be gone through, because there's some timelines and things for people to redeem their property, then they'll have a sale. And you can put in bids for property.
Right, and we've done that a couple of times over the years. A few years ago, I know the EDA board gave Jeff a certain amount of money to go do that. He went to try to buy some of those properties and got outbid. You know, his feeling was that if we were going to do that again, that we needed to be a bit more aggressive on that. I will tell you, there's no money in the budget right now to buy homes. And so I think, again, this is one of these things where we need to ask ourselves, how aggressive do we want to get on some of these housing issues? You know, do we want to spend more money on legal enforcement? Do we want to spend money buying properties? Do we want to try to fix some properties up ourselves? I mean, I think these are all really good questions.
Well, they're two. They address two of our goals. One is housing, but one is beautification.
Yes, it does.
Right.
Yes, it does.
You know, one of my thoughts when going back on George's comment is like most of these tax forfeited places are places that somebody's going to build a $200,000 house. They don't want to put it there.
That is the issue. Is
Right.
sometimes if given the dollar amount, you know, and if they have to pay, like, I know we have a couple of those from Park listed for a dollar amount, but let's just say they're 18,000 and they can buy it one a little farther on down the line in a newer area for 30. I know what most people would do. That's what's stuff.
What if we would bite the bullet a little bit and just give them the property to get building?
I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to be honest with you, George. I wouldn't just give people property, because we've done that a lot over the years and nothing happened. You have to require them to build something within a certain time or sell it to them, like a legal sale.
Require them to build.
Yeah.
Something I'm going to just make a historical observation. In the past, we had a fairly aggressive nuisance ordinance, and I'm not quite sure, because we just passed the attorney's contract, exactly what he would do for the money we're giving him on a retainer basis. But in the past, any taking it to district court to get a settlement with a family that's, say, still in their home, and a lot of times this often becomes an issue with people that are aging out in their homes and they don't have a lot of money to put into those big repairs. All those court costs and stuff even go on that property. And what we found out is we usually didn't get any of that money, because the people ended up having to abandon their home. They couldn't afford all the fees and penalties and court costs. It just became, and I can tell you at that time our city attorney made quite a bit of money for all this aggressive enforcement, but it drove people out of their homes. And I like these grants. I think, Eric, you said you're going to be working on another grant that would help bring in rehab dollars, because I think that's critical to help people in those situations that could alleviate some of that pressure on people who, you know, we just did our roof, not this calendar year, but 2021, and, you know, that's a good chunk of change to do a roof, and that's often one of the complaints, or the homes, or, but anyway, I just want to make that historical comment.
Yeah, we a couple of comments about that. The attorney works on an hourly basis, and so he only gets paid if we pay him. So he's not on a retainer, just so we're clear about that.
Okay, so there's not so many things that he does based on his retainer. It's just
That's correct.
every time he works for us,
he gets paid an hourly rate.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
But I think this all goes to the same question, which is there's some advantages and disadvantages to being aggressive on these things, as you point out. You know, and so you've got to decide, okay, do we want to be aggressive on some of these building things or not? Are there other strategies that we could take? Is it a multitude of strategies? I mean, there isn't a really good answer here. I will say that in general that, you know, we don't have we probably do need to rewrite our code, our nuisance codes. In fact, Shane and I were just talking about today about literally doing scrapping the whole code and starting over kind of thing with somebody else's model code because it's just such a kind of a stringy mess. But I'm not sure that that's really the answer. It's really about money and resources. We can only do so much because of our limited staff resources.
I guess I would hope that the bottom line for any of these homes, if they're a danger to the people living in them, a safety issue.
Well, sure. I mean, if it's a safety
that would
issue,
be enforced.
that's we enforce
especially-
safety issues for sure. But I'm talking about, you know, if you go around town, I've had people give me pictures. Citizens give you pictures. You know, I mean, I've been around town. I'm not blind. Sometimes I walk around. Shane hates me in the summers because I walk around town on Saturday morning and take pictures and stuff and text it to him. But this is a true story.
Unlisted number, get an unlisted.
But you know, there are probably more issues around town than we have the resources to deal with. And part of the challenge is that you'll give somebody a citation and they'll say, well, what about all these other properties that you're not dealing with? Well, yeah, that's accurate. That doesn't mean yours is not a problem, though. That's just kind of shifting blame a little bit. So I would say that we are definitely doing what we can with the resources that we have. Could we do better? Yes, for sure, if we had more resources, for sure. And if we got a little bit more direction about what are the things that are important to you. You know, is it weeds? Is it, you know, structures, you know, paint on structures? You know, if we kind of prioritize some of those things, that would help us decide a little bit too about what's important and what's not, and maybe some things will make a difference. I don't know. I mean, I think these are all really important questions, and I think we need to have a more robust discussion about this. Housing is something that's important to you as a council, and it's important to us too.
I would throw out that we had talked about it on Saturday, of maybe talking to other communities about their residential building programs and such. That might be another discussion to also say, what are you guys doing for blight and...
We have actually. Jeff and I took a trip last summer, not this summer, the summer before, down to Pipestone, and we talked to their chief building official at that time, and so we kind of have a sense for what they were doing, but we could certainly do more of that. I mean, I think that makes sense. Why reinvent the wheel?
See what's worked for them.
Yep. And what's worked for them is a dedicated person who does nothing but this. We don't have that.
When you talk about a community like Pipestone, they're at least twice as big as...
They're double our size.
So we need to talk to communities our size.
Yeah.
And maybe find some that are...
Communities our size are doing something pretty similar to us. They do not have a dedicated person doing that. And I'm trying to set appropriate expectations as far as what we can and cannot do. Can we do more? Yes. It requires more resources, you know, maybe some reprioritization, some things, you know, if you do one, you can't do another kind of thing. So.
Can I ask, who would be the person doing these kind of walk by assessments? Would that be our building inspector?
It'd be Claire, myself.
So could we dedicate 3 hours a week, 4 hours a week type thing? I'm just saying, could we set a modest goal?
I think that it's appropriate to set a service level. This is how much we expect, and that's what you're talking about out of this program. One of the things that I think is real problematic in our code is the way that it's set up right now is that code enforcement as a whole is in multiple departments. You've got the police that's doing the nuisance code, you've got Shane that's doing the building code, and Shane does weed notices, even though that's technically a nuisance code. So in my personal view, that needs to be kind of addressed so that you can point to that, hold a certain group or person or department accountable for it. So that's part of it. And then you can identify what those resources are. The other piece of it that I think is really important is that code enforcement and building inspection has to be a year-round program. It's not something you just do in May and send out a few letters and then, don't do it again. It's something you have to do all year round. In fact, what Pipestone, the guy in Pipestone told us, is that his biggest time of year for building code violations is in the winter, because you can actually see the homes because they don't have leaves on the trees and things like that. And so, but part of the challenge is that building inspections these building code enforcements are done by Shane in the winter, but those are the same people who are also doing snow removal and all this other stuff.
Problem is, like, if you do it in the winter, instance like this year, you can't see most of the roofs. No. I mean, so like for us, we did a few in November, so the leaves fell, but the snow isn't here yet. We'll do some, March, April, if things melt off, then that's probably looking its worst at that point. So we do some, and then a lot of them during the summer. And then some are complaint based. Some are, we usually just try to make a few laps around town a few times a year but we can issue violations, but it's getting them to do it is the problem.
That is the ultimate rub. I mean, what you'll find on these lists, I asked Shane today, I said, okay, well, how many do we have in 21? And he's like, there was like 12 of them in 21 that we did. And most of them are still a problem because there just we don't have a lot of really great tools, beyond litigation or criminal offenses. And in some cases, they kind of thumb their nose at that. So we've been talking about this for a little while. We didn't make as much progress last year as we would like, but I think that it's time to have a bigger discussion about what kind of resources and effort do you as a council want us to put into this.
Well, I'd like to see it put on a future agenda.
Yep.
And give the staff a little time to do some research and make some recommendations for us to consider.
And and while you're looking at the code, I would think that there's levels of, the ones that we did something about, or,
yep.
Those were, like you said, are beyond nuisance, those are health and safety, and then whatever that next stage and the next stage, and just because somebody's got peeling paint, that certainly is nuisance, but it's not the same level as the roof is.
In your mind, that makes sense? That is not the way the code is written.
That's what I say.
And I think that to a certain extent, I've never actually seen a code like that where it said it prioritized certain kinds of things over others. It's kind of like it either is a violation or it isn't. It's either assault or it's not. It's the same kind of thing.
No, that's not the close.
So from a legal code standpoint, it's exactly the same thing. You can't be a little bit pregnant.
Yeah, I have a question or a comment so like when all these churches go on all these mission trips, it's like, can we contact the churches and have them help the people here in Tracy instead of going off
Well,
across the country?
and that's kind of, I know that this fall, the John Deere dealer reached out, and I don't know if he reached out to Lions or how I heard about this, but he wanted to have his whole staff one day just close the shop down and do a project. But it was such a short period of time where he wanted to do it on this date that everybody was scurrying around trying to figure out, well, yeah, that's a great idea, what do we have, what can we do? But something like that where we have organizations that are willing to help. So if it's somebody that, but for the finances, would be willing to
Actually,
cooperate and
I
allow
mean,
us
we
on
could
their
go,
property
we could go to
help.
Lyon County and get paint. You know how they have that paint recycling place?
But I think that could come into our whole discussion of beautification and who we could
Mhm.
bring to bear.
Actually, we did that in the past, because my concern had been for the people that I said are aging out, and they need certain things, and certainly painting, but we contacted 4-H groups for service projects. There are organizations there are churches. Actually, there was a church organization some years back that came to town and worked on one of my friends' homes. And they actually accomplished, they painted the house, and they did. Now, if you have youth, you're going to have some good supervision, but usually those groups had parents that came with the
I
kids.
mean, that's a boost to our community vitality too. What a community should do.
Pitching in and helping, especially those that are at a point in their life where maybe they can't do things themselves and they don't have the resources to pay. That's
I
true.
agree with Seth. I think we need to put this on a future agenda. Give the city a chance to look at the different codes, and if you start over, throw our old one out to bring in a new one that's easier to just go off that and make changes versus trying to tweak our old one. I don't have a preference. I mean, you're going to bring it to us anyways, however you come up with it. But I think we need to just put it on as an agenda item.
Sounds great.
We all agree it's a big problem.
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Cool.
Okay. Anything else you want?
How's the equipment holding up through all the snow? We all right?
We break it and fix it, break it again and fix it, so.
Okay.
But it's
But
all,
we were set up fairly well. I mean, this was a test.
it's holding up. Things holding up pretty good, so far. So that heavy snow tested a lot of things and found the weak spots, but we were able to get everything going. We were plow short for a few hours one day, but just ran the other one a little longer and
Great
made
job.
it
Thank
through.
you guys, for sure.
Have you gotten the word out on the clogged lift station and so forth issues?
I had a letter drafted. Eric reviewed that last week. I got all the mailing addresses set up for that, but so far this week it's been good. Over the weekend's been pretty good. So Christmas time was terrible, but people come visit too, and we also have the fitness center on that same lift station too. So I don't know what people bring into there either. What they flush down. So it's just important that they only flush things that can be flushed, that decompose, and even though the wipes say flushable, don't flush them. I know we put a post out during COVID for the same reasons with the toilet paper shortages, kind of a list of what can be flushed and what can't. So other than that, we've had a lot of problems with garbage cans. When they're emptied, pull them back to your house. Don't let them lay on the street. Bring it out to the street. Once they're emptied, bring it back to your house, and then bring it back out the next week. We've been going around probably more of those than cars this winter. And if we do widen the road where your car is, I ask that you park in a different spot so we can clean that area up when you're not parked there. So, but other than that, I don't have a whole lot.
Is it actually against city ordinance to leave your garbage can in the street?
We talked about this. I don't know if we found it.
We did,
Did you?
yeah.
My memory is that it's a little bit of a unclear thing. It's illegal to put it out, but there's no requirement to take it back, if I remember correctly. I think that's the way it works. And so this is kind
It's
of,
supposed to be pulled back.
or maybe it's the opposite of one. It's one of those two
I think
things.
there is something that says when you.
So this is another one of these code issues that are
Not being followed.
that need to be cleaned up.
Not being enforced.
Yeah.
also not being enforced.
They
We
really
don't have
don't
the
have to
resources
sit
to
on the
enforce
street
garbage.
though. They
No,
can stay on the
they
curb.
don't.
That
They're
guy-
supposed to be on
that-
the curb.
That arm reaches out a long ways. I've seen it. He
But
he
they're
can
supposed to be
pick
on
up
the
my
curb, not the
pickup.
street.
And I think
Yeah.
one thing that kind of hit too this year was how many Monday holidays.
Yeah.
And I know that this last one, I think there were a lot of individuals that thought, oh, it was, Martin Luther King Day, so garbage won't be on Tuesday morning, it'll be on Wednesday, but it was on Tuesday. And I saw a lot of them sitting out there still yet that were brought out on Wednesday, weren't dumped. They're still sitting out there full, and
Yeah,
it's gonna be weak.
problem ones we have haven't moved all winter, so it's there's,
Mail them a citation.
and
Haven't heard.
it's easier to pull it to your
Garbage
house than try to find it in the snowbank, because eventually they're just gonna get hit with a snowplow, and then with little luck, it won't be damaged, and then you're gonna have to contact someone for a new garbage can, so. But, I know the county's hit several this year, and I know we've hit a few already that, I mean, the snow's heavy and it's gotta go to the curb, so.
Well, we just ask that the citizens work with us a little more on that
Yep.
nature, and hopefully they'll step up their game and it'll get better.
Yep. Other than that, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Eric?
Whew.
Yeah.
I thought we already talked about a lot of stuff
I
tonight.
know.
I do, the next item is the comprehensive plan, and I do have a presentation for this. We've been working on this for a year and a half, so I think it deserves, some explanation for the public, and a little bit more, than just a kind of an ordinary item. Can you actually, Diane, can you reach that and pull that around just so they can see the screen? So the 22 comprehensive plan, so
I'm sorry, will this be on?
yeah, this is on TV.
It will be, yep.
Nice.
I'll back this up so being is the 22 comprehensive plan, the presentation for this evening on that. So kind of the first question is, what is a comprehensive plan and why is this important? Well, the plan is it's really a tool that helps us guide to best use our city resources. It's not a hard and fast rule. It's not a law or anything like that. It's more like just a general plan. The first thing that it does is that it establishes a vision for the city's future, hopefully a shared vision between the policymakers, citizens, and stakeholders and people like that. Provides a legal basis for land use maps and policy decisions. So, kind of this. The plan talks about things like housing. So when you start talking about what you want to do as a city council about housing issues in the city, you can point to the comprehensive plan and say, hey, this is an important policy goal that's set out by this plan. And then serves as a marketing tool to illustrate to private businesses, hey, we're open for business. This is something that we want you to do, is invest in our community, and this is how we want you to do that. Just to give you a little bit of a history on that, we hadn't updated our plan since 2000, so it had been 22 years. So it was substantially out of date. There was a lot of discussion a couple years ago when this was authorized by the city council about, what is our vision for the future and how do we move forward as a community and what are we trying to accomplish? And I think there was a lot of sentiment, and still is, that people want to try to grow the city too. And so the comprehensive plan kind of helps guide us in how we might do that, and what are the issues that we would be facing when we are doing that. So, what's the plan methodology? So we hired Southwest Regional Development Corporation to put together this information. Rosemary Bruce White, the planner down there, Tracy resident, worked on this plan. So it came from a lot of different sources. The information in this plan comes from a lot of sources. One is U.S. Census data and other public kind of sources. We did a citizen survey. This is the first time I think we ever did it, where we sent a survey to every household in the city. We got over 300 responses, and asked people how they felt about our community and what they wanted to see in our community. We did some specific focus groups. I think some of you participated in some of those focus groups as well. We had a citizen steering committee that gave us some feedback. City staff was involved in that, as well as previous planning efforts. So, you know, like the stuff we did with the historical surveys or the Central Park master plan or the airport master plan. I mean, all those things were looked at as part of this. One thing I probably should have added on here as well that I didn't add on is that, you know, the Planning Commission obviously was the driving force behind this and had a lot of feedback into it as well. Rosemary Martin, who's not here tonight, really took a keen interest in this, specifically as the chair of the Planning Commission. So we kind of had the two Rosemarys working together is what it amounts to. So one of the things that the plan starts out, it looks at, it asks the question, these are things we've already talked about tonight, but ask the question, what are the challenges that the community is facing? I mean, what are those things that we need to overcome if we want to be successful? First one is workforce. Businesses in Tracy have trouble accessing and attracting employees. When you talk to businesses around town, they would say that. The unemployment rate, which is low, says that. The other interesting thing that says that is when you look at our demographics in the city, what you find is the two largest groups that we have are kids under 19 and under and seniors 65 and older. That's half of our population. Well, if that's half of our population, those are people that are generally not in the workforce. And so we have a smaller percentage of workforce participation in this city than you might see in some other places. So it's not surprising that businesses would say we need workers. It's because a lot of the folks aren't even in the workforce in this community. Housing, we already talked about tonight. You know, the housing stock is currently very limited. It's old. It's limited in variety. There's not a lot of choices for people. And there aren't very many houses on the market. Activities, there are a variety of activities around. There's not enough awareness of those activities, and there's definitely perceived lack of activities too. And I think we're making some strides to addressing that. I mean, Jan's actually been part of that, you know, with the Bone Builders program, and she gets 12, 15, 18 people, you know, a couple times a week for that, and it's the same thing is true for the new exercise class that we just put together. There certainly has been interest in that, and pickleball on Wednesday nights. I was there two Wednesdays ago or so, and they had 3 courts going all at the same time. So there's definitely an appetite for those kinds of things. We've just got to figure that stuff out. Infrastructure. We know we have major infrastructure needs. It also comes with a cost too. You know, when it comes with the cost of the water and sewer rates and the tax levy and things like that, and people are definitely feeling that. Downtown is a challenge. Empty buildings in disrepair. That's true all over town, but that's the oldest part of the community, and so those buildings are the oldest. And specifically in this plan, people say we like downtown, we like the way it looks, but we have concern about those empty buildings. Properties, talked about properties already. Many residential commercial properties are older, they're in need of extensive repair and maintenance. These are a lot of the issues that were identified in the plan as things that need to be addressed. So those are kind of the challenges. Some of this is just kind of informational, but it helps kind of guide us, you know, who we are. Some interesting things about Tracy. One, Tracy is getting younger as a percentage-wise. Almost 30% now, according to the 2020 census data, is under the age of 19. That's getting to be a pretty decent-sized number. The population of 65 and older, as a percentage of the population in town, declined in the last 10 years as well. I forget what the number is. It's in the plan, but we dropped several years, 3 or 4 years in average age in the community in the last 10 years. Tracy is also increasingly diverse. Only 79% white at this point. You know, that's getting to be a smaller and smaller number, and is going to increasingly be a smaller number. And so that's an issue that we have to talk about. Something we need to talk about in the community is diversity. The other interesting thing is that Tracy, as a percentage, actually has less poverty than Lyon County as a whole. You know, oftentimes you hear people talk about Tracy. Oh, well, Tracy is a community with inexpensive housing where people who can't afford to live somewhere else live. We made significant gains in the city in the last 10 years in terms of our household income and our poverty rates and our educational attainment. And what that means is that Tracy is actually a little stronger economically in some ways compared to the county as a whole. It's interesting. You know, I mean, the city's definitely changing in that regard. One kind of maybe negative trend is that when you look at what kinds of jobs we have in the city, we still have plentiful jobs, but they've changed and they're tight. Fewer people work in manufacturing and light industrial kinds of things, more in retail and service trades. That has some implications because a lot of times those jobs are part-time. A lot of those times those jobs don't come with benefits. And so it has an impact on the community as a whole because of that. By the way, if you have any questions anytime anyway through, just let me know, ask, because sometimes things come about right away. So some of the survey highlights, people that we ask questions of. One of the questions we asked is, what are some of your favorite things about living in Tracy? We wanted to know what people like about living here. This is called a word cloud, and so it was an open-ended question, so people would write in whatever they want in there. And so we took the words that they used, and the larger the word is in the word cloud, the more often they used it. So things like small town, community, school, parks, pool, quiet, friendly, great, close. I mean, those are all really positive characteristics. And what's really great about that is just that when you ask people, we didn't ask people what good things you like about Tracy. We said, what are some of your favorite things? It gives you an idea of how we might appeal to other people, why they would come to live here. And then, this is an interesting one too. What 3 words would you use to describe Tracy? These could be negative words too. We didn't tell them to put positive ones down, but they mostly put positive words down. Peaceful, quiet, small, friendly, safe, affordable. The only word that pops up that's negative that's big is boring, and some people might see that as a positive too, you know. But we definitely have a brand in terms of how people think about us. You know, this is a small community that people feel comfortable in. They like that kind of, small town, atmosphere for sure. And so sometimes people think, oh, small town, man, that's negative. No, I think that's a positive. That's what people like about this community, and I think that a lot of people would like that too. So here's some other survey highlights. 90% of those people said people who are not living in Tracy, who took the survey, said that they preferred single-family housing over any other kind of housing. I think that's what most people are looking for, is single-family housing. If you want to buy something. I think a rental may be a little bit different, but this is about buying. 75% said Tracy was a great place to raise kids. That's a huge number. I mean, thank goodness for that. The things that they were concerned about were what we were just talking about. 44% said the biggest areas of concern they have were either properties in disrepair or the conditions of the roadway. We put a lot of money in the roadways in the last few years, and I think that's probably getting better. But property conditions, we just spent 30 minutes talking about that. I mean, people are concerned about it. You're concerned about it too. The most popular and most used facilities are the Tracy Library and the Aquatic Center. So that's what people like the most. So we kind of had 4 goals as part of this plan that were set out. These are kind of somewhat aspirational goals, but they have some very specific things that we can do to try to reach them. And so part of our plan as a staff, because there's a whole implementation portion of the comprehensive plan, so part of our challenge as a staff is to say, okay, if this is your goal, what are the things that we can do, to bring to you as action items so that we can implement these goals? First one is community growth. First bullet, create developable lots for industrial, commercial, and residential uses. So if we wanted to grow, we don't have improvable lots at the industrial park. We have very few improved lots for homes, and most of them aren't big enough to put a modern home on anyway. So we need to, if we're going to build a couple homes a year, 2 or 3 homes a year, we got to have a place where they go. Got to identify that. Plan says we should do that. Continue to promote, enhance, and facilitate community events. I think it goes along with having a small town. You know, people like participating in what's going on in the community, you know. Working with the school district so that when you have kids that, it's just this workforce thing. You know, we need to retain the kids that we can to stay here in town. There's our future workforce right there. Apprenticeship programs for skilled programs. You know, you take a business like DeSmith Welding and they want to expand, but you need to have skilled people to do those jobs, and working with them in the school to train people for that, get people to stick around town, stuff like that. Working with partnerships on regional organizations like the CEO program, Minnesota Arts Council, SRDC, UCAP, all of those kinds of people we work with that can help us with these issues. We definitely need to review our zoning ordinances. Currently in the Central Business District, it's really limited. It assumes the 1970s, when your downtown was where people came in on Saturday night to go to JCPenney's and the jewelry store and stuff like that. Those days are gone. They're gone everywhere, incidentally. And so right now, one of the reasons we have empty buildings is because we just don't, there's a lot of things we could be using these buildings for that we're not, but they're not even allowed in our code. The best example that I can give to this, and we're not going to do anything about it, but we don't allow bowling alleys downtown, but we have one. So if we open up that code a little bit to allow for more uses, I think that would help us. And we think housing is one of those uses, by the way, too. Create programs to fill those vacant buildings, enhance and improve the appearance of buildings currently in use, and encourage efforts to improve the general curb appeal of the community. Also what we've been talking about. Part of that is the historic stuff that we're doing, which opens up funding for maintenance, aesthetic enhancement, preservation of downtown buildings. A lot of this is just about what pots of money can we go and get, and that's one of them. Next one, housing, which I guess we're going to be talking about more. We should. We need to look at the lot size minimums. You know, part of the issue we have right now is that we have a 10,000 square foot lot minimum for a single family home. Well, we have a lot of lots all over town that are undeveloped right now that have water mains and sewer mains to them, but they're less than 10,000 square feet, which means you can't build a house on them. Well, back in the day, they didn't build houses on 10,000 square foot lots. They built them on smaller lots. So trying to figure out, we're not the only community like that. I mean, a lot of communities have the same issue where you have these old lots that were platted 100 years ago, and you've got to figure out how to put a house on them. Policies, agreements, anything to increase home values is important. Use the CDBG program, which we have for the Small Cities Grant. We're going to continue to do that and apply for another Small Cities Grant to try to help improve homes. Work with employers to say, hey, what kind of housing do you need? Can you assist us with that? Identify and plan areas for new home construction. Community facilities. More volunteer opportunities and citizens involvement. You saw the citizen involvement earlier tonight with some of those citizens on the community center. It's the kind of stuff that we need more of with these facilities. Assessing and assigning, taking a look at parks and how we use those as community facilities. And then the last one is really in general just about creating more community gathering spaces for adults through enhancing existing facilities or new construction opportunities. That's just a fancy way of saying use the VMC more, honestly. Create more community gathering spaces means use the VMC more. But that's essentially what we've been trying to do and doing more of recently, and we need to do more of in the future. This is kind of a general outline of what we might be looking at in terms of timelines for infrastructure, which is the next goal. This is straight out of your capital improvement plan, but City Hall and VMC renovation, maintenance 24 to 25, phase 1 implementation of the Parks Master Plan. So this is like park improvements at Central Park, 24, 25. Longer term stuff in the parks, 29 and 32, identified in the master plan. Maintenance at the aquatic center, which we already have set out, starting this year. The hangars, and the runways at the airport, which are all identified in the airport master plan. Community center, meeting space, activities programming, starting in 2024. And then we have this Safe Routes to School grant that we got that's plans underway now, and that really is about kind of walkable sidewalks and bike paths and stuff like that. The next set is really about kind of your underground infrastructure, as well as streets and things like that. And so some of the stuff, we already have programmed through this year. Kind of the next one that's really important is thinking about what the next phase of this infrastructure project is, what we loosely call phase 3B. We're in phase 3A right now. This would be stuff like First Street East. We're looking in not until 2029 to 2033 for something like this. Yeah, the city council actually expressed, somebody said it, well, can we take a breather on some of these street projects for a few years? We ultimately have to, because we can't afford it. We have to take a breather. And so this kind of plan kind of contemplates, okay, let's take the next 3, 4, 5 years. Let's plan, focus on some other things, and then we'll come back to it again kind of at the end of the decade. Seth,
The sad thing is, looking at Shane's report, the number of water main breaks and so forth.
Less.
We're having a hard time keeping up.
Well,
But I agree with you. I mean, we can't afford to do any more right
yeah,
now.
I mean,
It's a tough spot.
we're in this situation where you have to balance the cost and the need at the same time, And what I hear from a lot of people is, boy, we're doing a lot. It costs a lot of money. And then when we start paying off some of our bonds in 2026 and then in 2029, then we'll have a little bit more breathing room to be able to do some of these things.
I don't think the water mains have been all that bad. I mean, we've had some, but it didn't like it was in the past.
It's less. It's been more the last month.
Yeah.
But those 3 water main breaks that we had the last month were the first we'd had in a year and a half. So
One was the new construction part that, I don't know if they made a mistake, but it was right there.
yep.
So actually, we only had 2.
And then there were 3 others.
Yeah, there was, yeah.
There was one out there in Center Street and 4th Street East. That was during the summer. And then we had one over on Greenwood Avenue, and then another one on, close to your house,
First
George.
Street, or 3rd,
Yeah.
2nd Street or something.
Yeah, 2nd Street East and State, 2nd State. It's like when it rains, it pours, I don't know why that is, but kind of happens that way. But this is the general outline of what we'll be looking at infrastructure in the next 10, 20 years, that kind of thing. So how do we do this? How do we accomplish this plan? The first one is that, we ought to start looking at, and I actually had an idea I was going to throw out there as well after our discussion on Saturday, but one of them is kind of looking at area plans, and that kind of creates a vision for what we can be. We did that with the Central Park Master Plan. I think that helps people kind of put a vision around what could that be. We're working on an industrial park master plan that's just gotten kicked off, as well as some work on some downtown housing. I think we ought to be looking at where's our future housing going to be too. What does that future housing development look like? Where is that? And I remember when, and I'm going to throw another thing that's not on this slide, but I'm going to throw this out as something to consider as well. I remember when Jeff Nelson was out here and he was talking about downtown redevelopment and things like that. And that's really what we're talking about when you're talking about buildings that are not being used, is redeveloping them. And you've got a community center down here potentially, as well as people wanting to spend more time on the VMC. Why we wouldn't want to look at doing some kind of downtown development plan. How do we redevelop downtown? What do we want downtown? I really like the idea of kind of this being the center, if you think of it as the center for activity and civic life, for the people in the city of Tracy. That's essentially what the VMC is, what a community center could potentially be, library across the street. It's kind of already here to a certain extent, but kind of creating that vision. I think sometimes if you don't have that, people, they don't know. You can put it down on paper. It helps people envision it a little bit better. Some of the zoning ordinances we need to address so we can remove some obstacles to development. We could look at annexation. I'm not sure that bringing new areas of the city is super important at the moment, because I think we have plenty here, but it is called out in the plan. And then planning, for our capital improvements into the future, which is something we do on a constant basis anyway. That's it in terms of kind of the big picture for the plan. Like I said, it's been in the works for about a year and a half. The next steps are to start to implement it, and which we're already actually working on some of this stuff as it is anyway. Any questions about that, or comments, or thoughts? Does this ring true to you would be my big question.
I was just going to say, I really like the idea of changing the downtown zoning to make it possible for some housing, using some of these buildings for housing. That's good.
Yep.
At least change it to reuse it.
Something else.
Yeah, otherwise it's just... I wonder where that bowling alley thing comes, because the bowling alley always was downtown.
Yeah.
And this is part of the issue that we find in our,
said that.
this is one of the reasons why Shane and I were having this discussion about the code, because there's a lot of things in the code we either don't enforce or they're outdated. I mean,
Well, sir, I think sometimes it's because it was done long ago before we had
That's
all
right.
these codes and ordinances.
That's right.
We found that in terms of zoning, and also now they have a state building code we adopted, but in the old days they didn't have any of those things. So I don't know if you call it grandfathered in.
Well, I mean, what I would say is that in general, the current zoning code was kind of modeled in the 1960s, and zoning codes have changed quite a bit. So this is what you would refer to as a kind of a use-based zoning code. It was based in an orientation that existed kind of in the middle to the late part of the last century, and the world's changed. What, you're smiling at me there, council member?
Because just be careful, because, a lot of us were around back then.
I was around, and I was born in the middle of the late part of the last century. I certainly remember all those decades that I just mentioned.
Maybe the bowling alley thing came up because people didn't want a bowling alley next to the high school and distract the students.
It's entirely possible.
No.
I mean, there's a lot of things like that happens.
Just over there, the bowling alley, so that would have been downtown, way back.
There's more than a few examples like that. They're not the only one. And we're not going to, obviously, cite anybody for any of those things. But what it means is that the code's outdated. If people are doing something different than what the code says, it means the code's outdated.
Well, I know in some comprehensive plans I've seen in the past, there's a land use portion of that.
Yep.
Is that coming then from planning and zoning at some point? Because that's sometimes how areas are rezoned, and
Yep.
whatever that downtown is currently structured for, the whole area would be rezoned.
One of the things that's not in this plan that you would see in a lot of comprehensive plans is, be a formal use and zoning map that would kind of say this is what the current use is, this is what the future use should be, things like that.
Industrial, this is where we see
Right,
new development,
right.
this is where we see-
This code doesn't have that. I think that is something that needs to be taken up by the Planning Commission almost next. Part of the issue that we have is that a lot of larger cities like that, I worked for a county that had a whole GIS department that did nothing but mapping. And so we don't have the resources to create those kinds of maps. Now, what Rosemary, that's our DC, told me is that they have some of those kinds of capabilities, to do that. So I think we need to do that as a next step as part of this plan, yes.
Because then you can kind of identify,
Yep.
you talked about a 16, 20
Right.
unit apartment complex. Where does that fit into?
Yep.
Or R1 zone or an R2,
Yep.
where would we envision wanting that to be, where's industrial going to be, all that good stuff.
Yep, I think that's exactly right. I think that's what we need to do next, is talk about that. You know, where's the next housing and development going to do? What are we going to do about our industrial park, and what does that look like? You know, where do you put multifamily? My intent is to start in 3 areas. One is we have an industrial park plan already kicked off. The second one is I think we need to look at downtown, because it's specifically called out in the plan, and it has a separate zoning district for downtown. And the third one is the housing one that you just mentioned. Where's that new subdivision going to be? I think if we focused on those areas, you know, it probably would address most of the issues. But that's my thought for what it's worth in terms of how you proceed.
And then maybe adding to that 4 would be, because this has come up a number of times, Highway 14.
Yeah, 14. I mean, that's always a debate from people. Well, do we spend money on 14? Do we spend money in downtown? The short answer is it's both and all.
But spending money on just what do we envision on Highway 14 for future land use there? I mean, what could go there?
I mean, it's your commercial corridor, your biggest commercial corridor right now. So, I mean, really, that's what it's going to be. But it does beg the question, because there's a lot of homes on Highway 14. You know, and what you see in a lot of these places is those homes sometimes transition to businesses. You see that in Marshall. Probably won't happen here, but, you know, we got to think about that. You know, we probably wouldn't want to allow any housing on Highway 14, I wouldn't think. So I think it's worth talking about that for sure. So those are all really good thoughts. Does this plan, you know, on its face say, yep, that makes sense to me? You know, a lot of it's stuff you've talked about as a council over the years, as recently as Saturday. You know, does this look like a good general plan?
I agree. It's a lot of information.
Yeah, I think we should publish on our website.
We will.
Allowance. You know, what
It's
people
a
say.
ton of information.
We will publish the whole plan on the website. I was waiting for you to adopt it first before I did that, but we will publish the whole plan.
To pull out some of the positive comments for people when they are looking at potentially what Tracy would be like for a community move, that there are those diagrams right there with the.
I love that idea, yeah. Use that as a marketing
You know,
tool.
that they don't have to go through this whole plan.
Right. Yeah, I guess I don't know that going through, putting that whole plan on the
Yeah.
thing would get to be
Can't imagine
overwhelming
somebody
for
actually
most.
reading all of that.
Well, it'll be, I'm sure it'll be, well, just right now, like any of our other,
Yeah, that they can click on
just
if
a
they want.
PDF, you can open it.
I think we can do
There might be
both. I mean, we can have the plan on there if somebody really wants to read all 138 pages of it, they can do that.
Go for it.
That's a lot of
If,
reading.
but we can put, you know, summaries too.
Yeah. This here, what you just gave us, I think would be ideal to have on.
Oh, I definitely can do that for sure.
In
You know,
my
the
opinion, 'cause
executive summary.
It's short and sweet, but it's exactly
Yeah.
kind of what, not exactly, but it's close to what we're thinking.
Yep.
If they want to delve deeper at the end of it,
When they
Yep.
can.
here's the link.
Yeah,
Yep.
there you go.
Yep. We will do that.
So what, are you looking, and we need to
So,
adopt this?
yes, so you just need to adopt it by resolution.
Do you have anything else?
I don't have anything else.
Okay, perfect. Let's move right into that then.
What number is that? Did we already approve?
We need 23-9.
Yep, 2023-9. I'll do that.
What are you doing?
That. Diane knows, she's already got it
I
rolled.
know what you're doing.
2023,
Making the motion to adopt.
yes,
2023.
there you go.
I'll second that.
All right, do we have any other discussion with that? Roll call, please.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Arvisu,
Yes.
Teagues,
Aye.
Landine,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Dobson,
Yes.
Mayor Corman.
Aye.
Thank you, Mayor. The next, and council, thank you. There's a lot of effort put into that. I want to thank the folks at SRDC in particular. The next item is accepting a quote and authorizing an agreement for audit services. So this is just a little bit of background on this. Late last year, our auditing firm, Abdo, informed us that they no longer had the staff resources to do our audit. So we started looking at options. We got a list of companies from them to contact. We contacted them and kind of got the same story from a lot of other people, which is that lots of smaller cities are getting kind of dumped by some of these firms because there just aren't enough accountants and enough staff to do all the work, and so there's just not enough people to do the work. So I think I contacted like 8 or 10 of them or something like that, and a lot of them, the ones that did respond, said the same thing. Well, I'm not even going to quote you anything because we can't do the work this year. We did get 2, however, fortunately. Both these firms are qualified. Both of these firms are firms that can do the work, and I have confidence that they can do the work. You are not tied into taking the lowest quote in this particular case. And just to let you know that kind of from a purchasing policy standpoint, normally the city council is only required to approve a quote for over 50 or a bid for over 50,000. This is under 50,000, but I felt this is an important enough thing that the city council should decide, especially since it's, ultimately the audit is coming to you as a city council. And so we got 2 quotes. One of them is from a smaller firm in Redwood Falls. Their proposal is in the, their proposal is in your packet. Both our proposals are in the packet. Sorry, I just need to pull that so I get all this right. It's Oberlo and Oberlo, small firm of 6 accountants out of Redwood Falls. They do a number of small cities around here. The closest one is Sleepy Eye. They quoted us a 2023 cost of $36,000, a 3-year cost of $109,000. The issue with them is that they don't believe that they can complete our audit by June 30th. We're required by the state to have it submitted to them by the end of June. Oftentimes you can ask for an extension. In fact, we did that 3 years ago because of COVID. We had some issues getting it all together because people couldn't come on site. They feel that we can ask for an extension, but they're saying they can't complete it on time. That's in the proposal specifically. It says they can't complete it on time. They did think that in future years they probably could, but they wouldn't make that promise. So they're less than the other firm, which is about $6,000 more next year, and then $2,000 more over a 3-year period. I got a written confirmation from them that says that they will complete the audit by June 30th. They're a bigger firm. They have 3 locations in the Twin Cities and Rochester and Red Wing. We would be working with the folks out of the Rochester office, and they do a lot of small cities as well. The largest city that they do is Casson, for example, but they do both of these firms do a similar portfolio of business of our size. Really kind of the choice boils down to, okay, you got a firm that's going to cost less, but they don't think they can do it on time. You want to pay a little bit more to make sure that it gets done. That's really what it amounts to. From my perspective, the staff did not specifically make a recommendation. Tyler and I have had numerous discussions about it. We think that we would be comfortable with either one of the firms. If I had to give you my opinion, I'd almost rather pay more money to make sure we get the work done. And I like the idea of working with a little bit bigger firm because they could offer some more robust services. But we are in a more budget conscious kind of arena, and so you can't go wrong by choosing the lower cost either. Both of these firms will perform the audit competently, and I had no concerns about that. They both were recommended by Abdo as well. And so what I kind of wanted to is throw it out there in terms of the pros and cons, and then kind of talk about that, and as a group to come to a consensus about how to proceed.
What does the state say if, okay, we put in for an extension this year, and then we come back around next year and say, does the state start looking at you a little funny?
Yeah, they would. If you did it every year, I think they would. I mean, I think that doing it every once in a while because of a specific issue, I think that they wouldn't have an issue with. But if you ask for an extension every single year, pretty soon they'd have some concerns.
And you're thinking the smaller company could possibly do that to us?
They said in their proposal specifically, we cannot complete your.
I get that.
Yeah.
But how about, did they, I thought you mentioned that they would possibly have to do it every year?
So what they said was, well, this is always kind of one of these interesting things that happens. In the proposal, it says that they can't complete it by June 30th. For sure the first year, and they wouldn't make a promise that they would. In an email that they sent to me later, one of the principals said to me, we cannot do it this year, but we think we probably could in future years. But they didn't put it in their proposal that they would in future years. So you can take that however it's worth. There's a risk that they wouldn't, but they wouldn't make a promise that they would, but they thought that they probably could.
How much did we pay for our audit last year?
About $32,000. So this is a little more. I kind of expected it to be a little bit more, but it's not off the reservation or anything.
The question I have now, is this a 3-year contract?
It could be a 3-year contract. We could just do it 1 year if you want.
But that price is, see, I did a little research. That price for the first year, 1 year, is their price? We could just do 1 year at that price?
I think they would probably prefer, and frankly, I would prefer it, because when you work with a firm for a while, the first year, it's going to take a while for them to figure out your peculiarities, because each city's a little bit different. I wouldn't want to just work with a firm for 1 year. I want to give someone a multiple year contract.
I'm surprised that they would, number one, because normally, my past experience is that the first year is their most expensive year, getting to know us, getting everything transferred, getting everything set up, and oftentimes if you tell them, I just want 1 year, you're going to pay way more than if you sign up for 3 years. That first year, I'm surprised that it's not like $40,000 for 1 year, but $36,000 if you do all 3.
I like the aspect of the smaller company myself, and they're closer, which I don't know if that makes a nickel's worth of difference. But
My only concern with them is, I've heard good reports from them. There's 6, they said in here, there's 6 people. And they're pushed right now that they may not be able to get this done. You drop one of those people. I mean, with the turnover there is right now in that field, they've got one of those 6 that gets a big offer from somebody else. You know, I mean, are we really slammed up against the wall then? You know, that's I would much rather work with someone in Redwood, but.
How many people are at the other firm?
Well, I don't know how many employees they have. That wasn't on their website. I didn't ask that question, but they've got 3 offices in 3 cities. They're doing a lot of work.
Large cities.
You kind of break these into like big national firms like Clifton Larson Allen, which will not do business with us. We actually even talk to them, but they won't do business with us. Medium-sized firms, which is what this Schaefer and Smith and Schaefer, I always want to call it Smith and Schuster, but that's something different. Smith and Schaefer is a mid-sized firm, and the one in Red Falls would be considered a small firm.
So if we were to ask for an extension for this year, what does that entail? How many extra days or months do we get?
Yeah, you know, it's kind of a question of what you ask for, but they did think that they could do it in July, so my guess is it would be a 30-day extension that we would ask for.
Okay, so not 3 months, 4 months?
No, it'd be a 30-day deal. Yeah.
And, okay.
Well, I'm with George. I agree with you. I'd feel very comfortable working with the firm from Redwood Falls. And it's a significant amount of money, and I'd be comfortable with accepting the offer from the Redwood firm for 3 years and asking for the extension.
And by the way, how much have we budgeted?
We budgeted $35,000 for this year, so we'll be. That's real close.
Right. And so we'd have to find the rest of the money for the
I'm
larger.
not so worried about $1,000 in the budget, but yes, we would.
Well, I think to ask for an extension, we would have justification that our auditing firm,
This first year, for sure.
yeah. I mean, it's not like we just said we don't have our facts straight, so.
Here's what I would suggest. If that's the direction you want to go, what I would suggest is that you write it into the contract that we could ask for an extension for the first year, but in year 2 and year 3, it has to be done by June 30th.
If we're gonna sign a 3-year, that's
You know,
necessary.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I think so.
And that should be a fair, and if they say, no, we can't do it, then we
There we
know,
go.
there we go.
Yeah.
Go the next route.
Well, my thing is like if they need an extension and they can still get it done in 30 days, then I don't really know why they would have a problem in the next 2 years.
Well, I'll tell you why. It's because everybody has to have it done by June 30th. And so if they can get us to push us to July, that means they can do more work.
If you look at the list of the cities that they're working with, pretty long list for 6 people.
It's a long list.
It's a long list.
But I think if we have it written in that we will allow the extension the first year because we are a new client and everything, but then the expectation is that it would be met for future years.
So are you
I
thinking,
asked
Tom,
that.
that's a bad choice?
No, I asked a question about, okay, the extension, what does that entail? And a lot of times it's the 30 days. If it gets farther into that, it can start affecting our reimbursement. If you ask for 30 and you don't get it and you ask for another 30, I mean, the closer you get to when they start doling out the money, that they can hold that up, and we don't want to be in that position.
So you're thinking the larger firm, even though it costs a little bit more, would make more sense for us long-term?
I'm just concerned with as many as they've got, they're already telling us, by telling us they can't get it done by June, that they're up till about here. They're already pushing it with 6 people. And in the environment we're in right now as an employer, people are so quick to jump ship.
How do you know that's not true for the larger firm?
You've got 6 people, one of them pitches, that's, do the math for percentage of how many of these. You got a firm with 100 and you can lose 4 or 5. That's my only thing when you're saying 3 years. I don't care. I really have no problem. I'd rather work with somebody. I'd rather make it a lot easier for you guys, definitely.
But if
I
we put
expect
that,
everything's pushed through the computer, though. isn't it?
Mostly, yeah, it's virtual.
It's
if
Yeah.
we put
push.
that verbiage in there, and if they say that they can't do that or won't sign it, then
Move
we'll
on.
know which way to go.
Do they have an out if all of a sudden they do lose? Are we going to all of a sudden get notice from them that they cannot fulfill the contract?
Yeah, I mean, I think in any of these cases, that could be the case, yeah. I mean, we can't force people to do the work. They could always opt out, yeah.
So they would, let's say, do it the first year with the extension, but after that, they would have that option
but-
if they lose employees.
It would really be dumb on their part to offer us that kind of a price, and then with the full knowledge that they might not be able to do it the second, third year, because that's going to cost them so much less the second, third year. First year is their
The tough one.
biggest outgoing amount for staff time to get it set up. Once they get it into the computer, then it really is kind of updating those numbers.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
the
the
first
second,
year's gonna be
third year should go faster.
Piece of cake. As long as we get the numbers.
Piece
in
of
there.
cake's the wrong word for accounting.
Well, for taxes it is.
All right, well, it sounds
Right.
like we're kind of, so I'll make a motion that we accept the quote from Oberlo and Oberlo for 3 years, but put in there that we wanted in there that we're guaranteed June 30th the next 2 years. And then for some reason, if that's not accepted by them, that you're allowed to go to the Smith and Schaefer immediately.
Okay.
Without coming back to us for approval.
Okay.
So it's basically a dual
That's-
approval.
That's helpful. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea.
So with that, that's the resolution 2023-10.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Arisa,
She didn't hear you.
Jen?
Yes.
Teets,
Aye.
Dodson,
Yes.
Van Dyke,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Schmidt, Mayor Corbin.
Aye.
Well, the last item we have on the agenda, and thank you for your patience tonight. I know it's been a couple hours already, and we met on Saturday too, is the 2023 personnel policy. This is something we generally do annually anyway, but in particular we had to do this year because of our new union contracts that were adopted at the end of last year. We had to modify it. There's a lot of things that went into this that were different, but kind of the main ones is changing some of the policies to reflect the new union contract. The second one is that we had to add in a policy with regard to FMLA because we have more than 50 employees, and that's not 50 full-time employees, it's just 50 employees. And we have more than 50 people if you include firefighters and everybody else. So we added in a section on FMLA. The third one is a lot of it is kind of some specifics. We didn't have any clear direction on comp time. Currently, it's basically at the discretion of the city administrator. And I, from my perspective, I feel like I need put some boundaries and guides around that so that people don't go too excessive on it. So basically, it allows people to accumulate as much as 40 hours in a pay period, a 2-week period, 20 hours a week. And then they can't accumulate more than 120 hours of comp time.
This is for non-union?
This is for non-union. Union people don't get comp time. This is for non-union people.
Overtime.
This is basically full-time salaried employees. This would be for the department heads and me, essentially, is what it amounts to, because we're the only ones that really would ever get comp time. And this limits our liability. We can't have people accumulating hundreds and hundreds of hours of comp time, because that becomes a huge financial liability for us. And
I can tell you that has happened in the past.
Yep. So this puts a cap on that, and it's good because then that helps give me some guidance, because I'm supposed to approve it now. So I'd like to know kind of what the limitations are on that, and this helps with that.
So this 120 hours, is that in a calendar year?
Yes, in a calendar year. That's correct.
So not to exceed.
That's correct.
All right.
That's correct. So it's 120 a year. So, I mean, you could use it during the year and accumulate some the next, but you're maxed out at 120. So the second thing is, the other thing that is kind of a difference in this in comparison to the past. In the past, the pay philosophy has been everybody was on a step plan. Even part-time employees were on a step plan. Well, the union employees are on a step plan because it's called out in the union agreement. But City Council has had some previous discussions about kind of maybe changing some of that philosophy and introducing some concepts of merit pay rather than just, pay for being here. And so this policy changes it a little bit and says, well, if you've got a union contract, we honor the union contract. But for everybody else, we're going to look at your annual adjustments to your pay, and we're going to look at merit pay, and that's going to be based on decisions by City Council in terms of what we can afford and how much we think is appropriate to pay people based on their comparable values to other communities, and yes, in their annual review. So this kind of changes the pay philosophy a little bit for a portion of the workforce, which I think, based on our previous conversations, is something the City Council was interested in, and that's a fairly substantial change to this personnel policy for about half our workforce.
So that is for technically department heads. They're not given a step increase.
Right. There's several categories of employees, but when we're talking about merit pay, we're primarily talking about the department heads and the city administrator, because those are the people that are salaried exempt employees. For folks that are in category, we have people in other categories like paid on call, regular part-time, seasonal part-time. All those people are not in that category. They're in a completely different category as well. So when we're talking about kind of the merit pay and things like that, that's primarily just the salaried exempt employees.
So when you say that it's based on what, city approval and/or if we have any money?
Well, I mean, it's always a budgetary decision every year in terms of how much you want to put into the pay plan, yes.
So it would, if it's not in the budget, it won't happen.
Well, ultimately, it becomes a city council decision in terms of the budget itself. I mean, that's true every year.
Okay, so for this year, there is no money in the budget for a step increase for department heads?
This year, and that was in the budget, there is a 4% increase in...
That's COLA.
Yes, for salaried employees, regular part-time employees, and the union employees. There is a 2% step increase for union employees, and there is no step increase for salaried employees. That is correct.
I guess, I don't know how we can single out a group of people and exclude them from something everybody else is getting. And I'm just throwing that out. You've already done the budget, so... And I was not part of that decision making.
You've already done that by just saying your hourly and your salary. You have clearly made two categories of income, specific guidelines. So you have made that regardless. And I think at one point in time, is the COLA increase that we did, isn't that more than what the COLA increase was the prior years?
Yeah, the COLA in the previous years was 2.5.
Right, well, because of inflation.
With the step is we said, some people weren't qualifying for the step. They'd already surpassed the period of time where the step wasn't every year now at whatever grade that they were at. And I think that was what went into it. It's kind of said, well, let's be fair, 4% across the board. So one person's not getting a step, another one's not. Because that was happening anyway, just even with the step program.
That's correct.
Well, because you had to wait so many years if you were on that schedule.
The step plan was basically inconsistent. Exactly what Tom is saying. Some people did not have a step. Some people had different size steps. Some people had different step intervals. It was, that's the definition of inequity. And so the way that we have our wages set in 2023 is that everybody gets the same COLA. And then the step for those that qualify as part of their union agreement is the 2% for everybody in every wage position. And the feeling is that was fair for everyone. And what people felt too is that for some people they stopped getting a step increase after a certain number of years. It just ended. So we had employees that hadn't been getting a step for years and years and years because they'd been here for a really long time. We didn't think that was fair either. So those people are now getting a step increase where they didn't in the past. So a lot of this, honestly, what you're seeing here is about equity. Because I don't think the system before had that as much as it could have.
I think the one thing we're trying to, and I'm not saying we have it perfect this year in this year's budget.
Right.
But what we also have to watch is employees that are not in the union, are not paying the dues and everything, shouldn't get all the benefits of what unionized employees get. Otherwise this facet over here is paying union dues so that they have this union contract, but then you have these employees over here that are not in the union, but they get all the benefits of the union as far as...
And I accept this is a done deal because the budget's already set and approved. I'm not debating that.
Where we're trying to make it comparable, we can't go, A for A, but where the union ones get the COLA and the step, non-union employees will get a COLA and a merit.
I don't remember.
The merit is not going to be a guarantee.
And so
I think that's better myself than a guarantee step because somebody that's not doing their job is getting the same increase than Pam that wouldn't do half the job. But she gets the same step because she's been there the same amount of time.
Okay, so if based on their annual evaluation and they're doing an outstanding job this year, they could get merit pay.
No,
we
we
don't
did
have-
not,
we
we did
don't-
not budget that. We didn't enter
got a
that
4%
into it.
That's correct. This year, we don't have merit pay in the budget. And we
that's-
we didn't really have a system even to do that.
No.
So what we would essentially do after this is, if you adopt it like this and we move ahead with a system like this, essentially what it means is that two things are going to happen. One is that we'll do the reviews. And then we'll talk about, during the budget process, what do you want to put in that merit pool? What do you think is fair? What can we afford? And then in addition to that, we'll do some salary surveys for some of these positions as well. Because I think that's important. We want to pay competitive wages. That's actually called out specifically in here. We want to pay competitive wages. So in the past, you would get hired at step A and then just kind of move through your step. Kind of the way to do it in a more modern way to do it, particularly for exempt employees, is to kind of have a pay range. And you end up kind of paying based on someone's experience. And that way you can pay more for experience as opposed to just saying, no, you have to start at step A. So it's going to allow us to be more competitive, which we have to be more competitive with, particularly with our salaried employees, because some of these are really technical jobs, and there just aren't that many people around with that skill set.
And in the past, we've done salary surveys. I think there also used to be at one time, I don't know if they still do it, but women were often underperforming in salaries, even though they were doing the same comparable job, and so we had to do some equity pay adjustments.
Yeah, we haven't had an equity pay adjustment in many years. We had to file a report with the state that looks at that, and we don't have any violations and haven't had.
Okay, so you're in
recently.
compliance at this time?
Yep.
Good. Because that was more gender-based.
And I do think we have work to do
Yeah.
on this, but there's nothing to say that 4% should be what the COLA is. It's what was agreed upon in the negotiations. But a
And
lot of places are not getting 4% COLAs. So
But
we
Jerry,
could
I think a lot
technically
of places
say-
were trying to make some adjustment due to, we had some pretty steep inflation, so I assumed that that was one of the
Well, and I can
factors.
tell you, there's businesses that gave a 2%.
I just
For
have
COLAs.
to, I just have to sell more to get it raised. So.
I mean, a 4% COLA is not the norm COLA. I can tell you, I didn't get no 4%.
Me either.
Well, we will begin working on that in June.
That's right. I mean, what my goal would be is that I would, the League of Minnesota Cities in the past has done a salary survey. We participated in it. Unfortunately, this year they decided to discontinue it. So I'll end up having to do kind of a, one on my own. I'll probably just benchmark against some other cities in southwest Minnesota, like Springfield and Slayton and places like that. They're similarly sized to us. And see what they pay, because we need to kind of establish some ranges for what positions should be paid.
The one thing we don't want to do is fall behind in wages
Yep.
and benefits. That is one thing that we do.
Because that's how
I
you
guess I'm
attract
saying
quality applicants.
Talking about the ones that were on the negotiation committee and that. But if we don't have employees, we're not going to have a city either.
Yeah, we're a service industry.
Yes, so I mean, we want our employees to feel like we are looking out for them, and not just the union ones, the non-unions, the salaries, the department heads,
Yeah. They're more
because
than employees.
we
I mean,
need
they're our
them.
neighbors and friends too, so I would hope that they realize that we're trying to be fair.
That's all the presentation I have, unless anybody has any questions.
I had a couple on so Columbus Day or the day after Thanksgiving, there wasn't a limitation in there of how many could qualify for that. Are we regularly open that Friday after Thanksgiving?
No,
for
we're really not. I mean,
office?
ultimately, it's a weird deal.
Mhm.
It's really part of the union contract in reality. And for the most part, the only time you see that is in some public works employees who take the Columbus Day off instead of the day after Thanksgiving. Because some of them kind of take they take the risk that there's going to be a snow day on the day after Thanksgiving anyway, and so then
Well, that was my question. If everybody decides to take the day after Thanksgiving,
we're not closed.
what do we do? I mean,
We're not open on the day after Thanksgiving.
but I mean, if we did have a snowfall, we had everybody.
Well,
take-
it's
I mean,
the same it's the same for any holiday. If we have snow, holidays off, and you're part of that snow crew, holidays off, and they know that.
But I know that we had the same kind of thing, but oftentimes there was a limit. Half of the staff could do that this year, half of staff could do that switch the next year. So so that everybody wasn't out of town.
We
because
could-
They got a 5-day holiday.
I don't think we could do anything with the public works crew because it's in the union contract. So I think we're kind of stuck with that, unfortunately.
But I also believe, and I don't know these guys real good, but if they had the day off, unless they were out of town, they would be here working because it's their town too. It's their community.
Yeah, right. No,
I truly believe that they would step up and do what they needed
Right.
to do, but I could be wrong, I don't.
well, and I believe the exact same, but if you knew that you're gonna have Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you're more apt to head out of town. You know, and then you've got plans for half of the people out of town.
They probably would come back, wouldn't they, Shane?
Sure, Florida.
They're always here.
I noticed on one of the things, I think, page 42, number 9 is blank. It had all these things that they could, you know, issues that they could be terminated for. And you had a blank in there. So I don't know
We did?
if you did that one.
Is there something I
Is that
missed?
a really bad one? It's just 9, it doesn't
Page
mention-
42?
Yeah.
Where was the where my 9 was blank.
So let's come up with.
Yeah, I think that's just an extra number in the list got in there somehow. Sorry about that. I'll take that out. I can fix that. There's no secret invisible ink or anything there.
I just have one clarification.
Yeah.
The difference between a complaint and a grievance. Because with the grievance, it can come to the council if the people aren't happy with what the city administrator decides on a grievance, they can bring it to the council. For a complaint, it says the city administrator's decision on the complaint will be final.
Well, a grievance is a formal process through the union, and so it applies in that particular circumstance. And that's called out in the union contract, which is why that language is written there.
So why wouldn't we have the same type of language for a complaint?
You could, I suppose, but I guess that creates a number of problems from my perspective as your city administrator, and this would be true for any city administrator. You have to be careful about the difference between a serious charge, which is like a grievance. There are some other places in here where it calls out things like if there's an issue of, say, sexual harassment or assault or something like that, you know, and let's say someone accused me of sexual harassment, you wouldn't go to me to resolve that issue. But in the case of a complaint, you know, a complaint is something that is typically less minor than or more minor than a more day-to-day thing. And it's not really best practice to basically allow all those things to escalate. First of all, it could be an issue, and second of all, it kind of cuts the city administrator's legs out from under him, honestly.
Well, I was just kind of wondering what the difference was. 'Cause, no, I don't want
A grievance
all
is
the
a formal
day-to-day
process.
things to come to us
A
as
grievance is a
council.
formal process the union goes through. A complaint is just a
Well, and I
Or
something else.
anybody could go through
And I-
the grievance.
Can anybody have a grievance or only the union people?
grievance is called out in the context of the union contract. So that language applies to the procedure in the union contract only.
So
But
what if-
any employee could file a grievance.
They weren't union.
Well, and
Only union employees can file a formal grievance because it's only in the union contract.
So, but this is our personnel book, so then do we need to look at that non-union people should have the same option to, if they're not happy with what you've said, right, or decided right now, you're saying if they're not in the union, they can't bring it to the.
Well, and
past.
I had the same question, but I guess what helped me a little bit, and I don't know if this will help or not, in the case of complaints, but then it says other than about discipline, termination, demotion, or pay reduction, and I sat there and tried to think, well, what else could there be?
How about hostile work environment?
That's the only things that would be final. But I had the same question, because when you say the administrator's decision on a complaint is final, but you already have these steps, and one of the steps is...
Well, if you don't like the decision of the city administrator, your redress is to fire the city administrator. I mean, ultimately, that's what it boils down to, right? I mean, if I'm just laying it all out there.
Well,
that is your redress.
Well, what would a hostile work environment be for a grievance or a complaint, or what would that be?
It
Well,
could be
it doesn't
either.
matter because a grievance is only for the
It
union.
could be either. It could be either.
So if
But
it's
it
a
would
union-
have to be a complaint if it's a non-union, is what you are saying.
That's how I read it, because a grievance is specifically outlined as a procedure in the union contract. That's how, and it's called out how you do that and what the escalation, to that is, and what the procedure is and things like that.
So really, we're saying if you're not in the union, you weren't going to have that ability to move it forward.
Not
I'm
in the same
concerned
way
with
if
that.
you don't file. Yes, that's essentially what the policy says.
Yeah, I think as council, we have a right to have some thoughts on this.
I guess when you say it the way you did, it concerns me that non-union employees don't have the same rights if they have a,
Problem.
If they have
yes,
a grievance.
without using the word complaint or grievance. If it's a hostile work environment right now, non-union employees wouldn't have an option.
Don't they already anyway?
Yeah, what?
Oh, I think employees communicate with you on a regular basis if they have concerns.
But not in a formal sense where they can bring it to a council meeting. That's what this says, basically. They're saying they don't have a right to do that, is what this says.
I don't think it says that they don't have a right to do it. It just says that it's not a grievance procedure, which is specific to how the union contract is written. That's how it's written, why it's written that way.
I would like all employees to be able to have the right to proceed after, if they're not, if they don't like the answer, so to speak. I don't think we're going to get frivolous things on this. I can't imagine we would. I mean, that's kind of a big step to disagree.
Then it also comes to, if it's a union, you go to your union rep, correct?
If you have a
So
grievance, yes.
if there's a complaint and the person wants to take it farther, who do they take it to? And who's gonna pay for that? Because they probably have to go to Matt. And then we're picking up the bill for.
Why wouldn't they just come to the council?
No, they wouldn't have, I mean, if we follow the same type of process, is I guess what I'm just thinking, between grievance and complaint. I understand the verbiage has to be what's in the union contract, because that's what was signed.
Right.
But why can't it be the same verbiage for either one?
I think so.
As long as we follow the union verbiage, we should be fine for all employees
Okay.
with that same
So if
verbiage.
All right, you can make that modification.
If we struck that last paragraph, or that last sentence, or we modified that last sentence.
I would just add a sentence then that says upon the decision of the city administrator, the employee has the right to appeal to the city council or something like that.
I mean, I'm trying to find now the grievance, I have the complaint up here. But I think as long as we word it, I mean, just, do we have to have a separate thing for complaint? Can it be grievance/complaint? Is it kind of just a play on words?
I think there's a difference between a grievance and a complaint in terms of not just in the union contract, but in terms of the magnitude, I would think too.
Okay.
You know.
I guess I would just like to see that even with the complaint that the employees still, because that's what
Absolutely.
non-union employees are going to be held to.
I can make that change. I'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
Yep.
I would really appreciate that.
Yep. I'll do that. So they have the right to appeal to the city council, if I'm understanding that correctly. Yep, can make that change.
And there were, I should have written down which page it was. There's one that talks about if in the judgment of the supervisor,
Yep.
the employee can be dismissed without the first 3 steps.
Yeah, and that's common.
I think, wouldn't it be helpful to have a second person, either the city administrator or a second supervisor,
That's
before
straight out.
someone gets fired?
That's straight out of, well, in practice we do, because we had that circumstance actually earlier this year, as a matter of fact. But last year I should say, what I would say is that that language is pretty, I think that's in the union contract. I could be wrong about that, but if it's not, I don't have an issue with it being.
Would a second person be in the room, so to speak?
Well, you should always have a second person in the room anyway, under those circumstances, in my view. But I would think that let's say, for example, there was an issue with a department head and someone had reported the department head. Under normal circumstances, they would probably bring me into it at the same time anyway, just so I, would be part of it. And we wouldn't, I don't think we would ever apply any, discipline that didn't follow the steps, without my involvement. It just wouldn't happen.
It just seemed weird because all of a sudden, you have this really nice 4-step grievance procedure, and then a sentence below it, you say, but in certain circumstances, you can just set that whole thing aside. It just seemed kind of.
That part is directly in the union contract. It actually says that in the union contract. It says that under certain conditions, and it talks about malfeasance, and there's some specific.
So it's defined, Eric.
It's defined in the union
It's not just, if I feel like it today, I might be harsh, maybe the next time, the next.
It's defined. It's defined. It's still open to some interpretation, but it's defined, yes. It's defined.
Your employee can easily.
So whether they're in the union or not in the union, they would have the same protection.
I mean, ultimately, yes. I mean, well, in terms of a corrective action program, yes. In this case, yes. We're essentially treating everybody with corrective action programs in exactly the same way, yes. Yes.
I guess
So
my
could
only
just-
comment is that when you set that correction action procedure aside, you're taking a big step. I mean, you're taking kind of a.
Oh, yeah, it has to be something pretty.
Very serious.
It has to be something pretty serious.
And it'd be nice to have that second opinion and make sure.
And maybe
everyone's
if
just
you,
gonna follow
instead
up.
of saying department head or administrator, change or to and.
I think so.
What page is that on?
I don't have my pages.
Yeah. I'd have to
Tells
look.
you
I
up in
wish
the
I'd
corner.
written it down.
Oh, mine isn't. I tap there and it doesn't. It just tells me my
Doesn't it say on the bottom?
percentage.
Doesn't love you.
Okay, 40.
I can find it. I know what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about. I remember what you're talking about. I can make that
It was just
modification.
like a small paragraph that kind of just got me up there, like, whoa, weird. We just got done having a good process and then we set it aside.
Yeah, and that it's only for certain circumstances.
Yeah, I can understand the circumstance, it'd be just nice, I think, to protect that person and to make sure that the one that they're firing realizes there's backup.
So what happens if the administrator is your supervisor?
Well, then ultimately,
Yeah, it would
it
probably
would
be-
end up going to the council at that point.
Okay.
Hopefully,
It's under the grievance section if that will.
I mean, this is part of the challenge of having a small operation. I mean, normally if you had a big company, you'd have a HR department and they would kind of handle things a little bit more, so that your supervisor can be more hands-off. But unfortunately, we don't have a large enough organization for.
We did know for a while.
Yeah, and when we made the decision to, when Peggy declined, first of all, we did for a short period of time. Before I got here and in the beginning, the city administrator was essentially HR. And I kind of created that position for Peggy specifically. And then when she took another job, we ultimately, decided that it made sense to go back to the way it was before. We just couldn't have, it became a cost issue partially and also
Well, skill set too.
skill set too, yeah.
I mean, that HR position becomes very complicated and they're the primary one to keep us out of the course.
Yep.
I would trust that the administrator has the knowledge that you can't just fire somebody without just cause, or
I
you're
would
going
hope
to
so.
cause yourself more trouble in the long run than anything. And yes, if he's the supervisor, that, council will get pulled.
Council would have to get pulled in. That's right. If I decide to fire Diane tomorrow, which is obviously not going to happen.
Pull the mayor in.
But
You can put it right on the agenda for the
yeah,
next
I mean,
meeting.
if you've got a situation where it involves the city administrator, you're going to want to involve the city attorney at that point and pull the city attorney in, and then you're going to have to, I mean, that's a bigger.
There's a lot more risk there.
There's a lot more risk there. And when you hire a city administrator, ultimately, that's something you got to think about too. Are you hiring somebody that understands something about, human resources and employment law and stuff like that? I mean, you would hope that you'd have some experience in that, but you may not. I don't know. I mean,
So has Matt gone over this and?
yeah, Matt reviewed this. Yep,
Approval?
Matt reviewed this and gave his approval. That's how we ended up adding the family FMLA stuff. Yep, Matt has reviewed this.
So no matter how long they've been here, do they get that with pay, without pay? The maternity leave?
You have to have been an employee for a year before you're eligible for FMLA, and that's federal law.
Even if you're
It doesn't have to be with.
50 employees or more.
It doesn't have to be with pay. We don't.
You only have to, if you're under 50 employees, you don't have to follow FMLA rules, but we are over 50, so we do. Does that make sense?
Okay, so I thought you just said that they have to be an employee for a full year before they would qualify.
That's correct. That's also
And
part of
that's
the law,
at any level?
at any level.
So are we giving family medical leave for anybody?
I don't believe we have.
I mean, it does not have to be paid.
I understand that,
It just
without
has
pay.
It just
that the
basically
job is
guarantees that your job is
guaranteed.
there when you come back, yeah.
They
And I
can
don't,
use PTO or whatever, but what
There
we are
would be no
saying-
pay, right.
we haven't
It's like
had
a
that,
job will be here.
right,
Yes,
we haven't
but-
had that circumstances since I've been here, where someone has taken FMLA, or even requested it, so,
Within their first year.
at all,
At all.
at all.
But I'm saying, in their first year, nobody would be allowed to take family medical leave without pay.
Yes, that doesn't mean they can't take other leave if they're eligible and have it, or even unpaid time off, but they would not be eligible for FMLA leave, which is a completely different category.
They would have to take a leave of absence.
Right, it's a
And then
formal
there's
process.
not the
Guarantee to hold the
guarantee
job.
of their job being held, but let's face it, I would hope we have a heart
Yeah.
and we would still hold their
Of course.
job, so.
That is in here because we're required to do it, which we want to follow the law, of course, but we would do it anyway.
I suppose it could happen, but we're fussing over something that's.
Yes,
not
we
gonna
are.
happen.
Yeah, we
So
are.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2023-11 with the changes to the grievance
There's
complaint.
change of the grievance complaint to make those mirror each other a little better, and then particularly a role of the city council is what you're concerned about, and then this kind of and department head and city administrator.
Two people
Yeah.
involved.
Yep.
before and then
Those are the
the
two changes I think
implementation.
we're talking about. Yeah.
Yep. So I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Teagues,
Aye.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Shones,
Aye.
Landike,
Aye.
Dobson,
Yes.
Arbisa,
Yes.
and Mayor Corman.
Aye.
That's all I have tonight, Mayor. Thank you for your time. I know it's been a long meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Let's just
Thank
talk.
you for being here, Seth.
Yeah.
Mayor.
I was
Yeah,
gonna
you
talk
too,
to Seth
Seth.
and I looked up and
You promised you'd never do that again.
I'm just going to say,
All the time.
No,